We always have bright lights, big city feel inside this studio, don't get me wrong. But Eddie Garrison, for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's because of the gummies that took effect or what's going on, but he's got the lights in here at like 10,000.
I never change the lighting, Jake. Whatever it's at when I get in here is the lighting.
This is like, is it just me, Jimmy? Maybe it's me. Are my pupils unusually dilated? I don't know, but it's very bright.
Oh, now Jimmy's setting the mood.
That's right. Now all of a sudden, we're getting ready to play a little Barry
Hey
White.
now.
How are you? Little afternoon delight here, huh?
How about it?
I like that. Good afternoon to you on what is a Wednesday, correct?
That is accurate.
Hump Day Wednesday here on The Fan. It's a Hump Day Wednesday everywhere in Indianapolis, for that matter. My name is Jay Query. You just heard the voice of Jimmy Cook. Eddie Garrison is here as well. It is Query & Company 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. And like I said, the station already like 4 times. Okay, let's get right to this. There are some updates out of the 56th Street with the Colts that I think people will find of interest. And this is a big one. And I know that typically each week there's really kind of a schedule when it comes to covering the NFL that we go through. And I think fans have, are because they're obviously along with us during each week. You get the Monday where you're recapping what happened from the game before. You have the Tuesday of then starting to look towards what the next opponent's going to be. You have the Wednesday that's the first real availability for talking to players and getting their, from the locker room standpoint, updates of trying to find things out from an injury standpoint. Then on Thursday, you get kind of the separation of who's going to practice Friday and who's not. And then on Friday, you have the final walkthroughs and you get an idea of who would be in or out for the game itself. Obviously, this week, a little bit different for 2 aspects. Number 1, Colts coming off a bye week, so no game to discuss. Number 2, one would assume that means that they are full throttle, ready to go all the way to the accelerator with the injury report being such that they are 100% healthy. Now, there are guys that are still coming back, and we have some information on that from earlier today that we now know. Number 1, Josh Downs, it appears. Eddie Garrison, I will let you update me on Josh Downs. The last that I'd heard, Josh Downs trending in the right direction, but still no certainty, correct?
Do we want to hear from Shane Steichen?
On Josh Downs?
Correct.
Okay, I would rather hear from Shane Steichen than hear from you. That is correct. That's an accurate assessment. The bright lights have illuminated that brilliant mind of yours. Yes, here is Shane Steichen talking about the availability of Josh Downs.
We're going to designate Ryan Kelly and Jalen Carlisle for return. We'll see how the week goes for those 2 guys. Also, Braden Smith, he's still dealing with the personal matter. I don't anticipate him playing on Sunday. But again, I won't get into details, but respect his privacy and support him.
Josh Downs practice today?
He will practice today, yeah.
Interboard leaning.
Yeah, he's back.
So that was
Got a lot
Shane
of nuggets
Steichen
there.
on all of them,
Yeah.
not just Josh Downs, right? So there you go. That now we have the lowdown on everybody. In terms of Smith, he's been a really good player for them, and he's been one that when he has been available has been, I think, really was kind of found money at, on the right side of the line, and yet he has obviously not always been available from a health standpoint. Now, in this particular circumstance, with it being a personal reason for absence, I don't know what that is, and I certainly totally understand and respect that they have no obligation of telling us what it is that's going on with Braden Smith in terms of whatever personal challenge it is that is keeping him out of the lineup. Anywhere that you work, any line of work, athletes are no different. People certainly are entitled to those periods if there's something going on in life. So I do understand that, and that's one of those where you just simply say, hey, whatever it is, I hope that works itself out. But the bottom line is, Jimmy, I do think that as much as we critique Chris Ballard, and we do, one of the areas that he always kind of pushed out his chest about of being a strength of his is building depth in the trenches. Defensive side of the ball, I don't know that, maybe now we're starting to see that they have a defensive line and some pass rush with young guys, and they have a little bit of depth there. Nothing outstanding, but they've got some depth there. On the offensive line, while it has been porous at times, at the very least, they do have a couple of guys that have shown a versatility to be able to plug in if there is necessity to move guys around. My point being, if Smith's not available, but Kelly is able to go back into the center position, Bortolini's a guy that you might be able to play at a couple of different positions. Danny Pinter was able to come in and play capably at the center position when you needed it there. And you know the left side is good with Ryman and Nelson so long as they're healthy. But they do have a little bit of depth, I think, at the offensive line.
Yeah, I will tip the cap there for certain to Chris Ballard in that regard.
You two okay?
We're
what's
both
going on
battling,
in the
whatever.
studio is both of us, right?
I don't know what's happening.
And I was fine until like 2 minutes ago, and now I got the frog in my.
I think I'm good. I'm good now. I will tip the cap where it is due for Chris Ballard in that regard. But you mentioned where they are defensively, and the main selling point was they were going to be able to win in the trenches and give enough time to bide time for their secondary and not let it be a liability. And the fact of the matter on that side of the ball is they rank towards the bottom half of the league in pretty much every important category that measures defensive success. And as you map this thing out, this isn't necessarily a conversation for this week as much as it is the offseason, but that's not sustainable. And if you're not going to make a change at general manager, and I've already seen the think pieces out there about this very topic this week, there's going to be talks for a change of defensive coordinator. Because if you don't have a problem with the personnel that are being acquired, you're not going to blame your general manager for that. Then you ultimately have to blame who is in charge of setting up the defense for success, and that would be Gus Bradley. Now, maybe we're not there yet, but the talk is there around the market right now, talking about how they're, 24th in yards per game, 27th in points given up per game. It's a unit that has struggled. And if you're not going to blame the talent acquisition man, you have to blame the person that's supposed to be building up the roster for success. Speaking, though, to Downs, a point I do want to get to in that regard, I can't understate for Anthony Richardson and this offense how important Josh Downs is to this offense. You look at where he ranks amongst the league's best, he is around 35th or better, and you might think to yourself, oh, that's bottom half of the league. No, it's not. It's right there in the middle or above of the pack. That's of all starting wide receivers around the league. He ranks there in receptions, in targets, in receiving yards, in yards after catch. He is as dynamic of a player as they have in an offense that already features the likes of Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, and Michael Pittman Jr. And, Jake, we talked about all this season what an improvement year over year it's been for that wide receiver room, and that's including whatever the heck's going on with A.D. Mitchell, kind of dragging that room down. They are where they are because of a leap forward by Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman Jr., despite the back injury, still being a serviceable target possession wide receiver, and Josh Downs being able to beat man coverage, get separation, and be helpful for your offense. So you get him back against a Denver team that's core identity is beating you, especially in man-to-man looks, and you have a breaker like that in Downs in addition to Pierce, that's a winning formula for you. I'm not saying rush him back, but if he is ready to go, boy, that takes the entire aspect of what they can do offensively against Denver to new heights.
By the way, we sound like a mass unit in here.
We do.
I don't know. Honestly, do we need I think we need an air purifier. Because none of us are, none of the three of us are sick, no. But yet we came in here. It's like there's some sort of an allergen in the air. Like, you know what I mean? You got Eddie over here wheezing all over the place.
I sneezed.
Huh?
I just sneezed.
Well, but we're not talking about that. I saw you had to go under the desk there just a second ago. And
well, I didn't want to be broadcasted over the air.
if this show, okay. Stand By Me. You guys have or have not seen the movie Stand By Me?
It's been a long time, but yes, I have.
I realize
it.
it's it's a 40-year-old film at this point. But
yes, I have.
If this show is Stand By Me, now in Stand By Me, you've got River Phoenix, who plays Chris Chambers. You've got Will Wheaton that plays Gordy LeChant. He's the main character, right? He's the author.
Yep.
You've got but River Phoenix is kind of the ringleader guy. He's the cool guy, right? You've got Corey Feldman plays Teddy Duchamp, and he's like the wild and crazy curveball. And then you got Vern, and I always forget the name of the guy that played Vern, but he's the one that went on to basically be the really good-looking dude.
Jerry O'Connell.
Yeah, Jerry O'Connell, thank you. He was what, Robin or Superman or Batman or one of them, right?
I think so, yeah.
At any rate, I'd like to know on this show who is each character. Maybe listeners should tell us that, because unequivocally and without question, Eddie is Vern, right? I mean, we know this for a fact.
Yeah.
He's got his cherry-flavored Pez. He brings the comb because he wants to make sure. I mean, look at Eddie's hair right now. Eddie actually, did you buy one of those infomercial wave things for your hair?
Nope. All natural.
I mean, it is impressive. Now, the style and the way that you wear your hair, it's impeccable, right?
Thank you.
The problem is it's a little bit 1977 impeccable, but it's impeccable nonetheless.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I mean, I'm just saying, But you kind of look like Vern.
I think you're just jealous that I've got the curls and the waves over here.
Oh, I would listen.
You're pencil straight. And then Jimmy just doesn't say anything because he has no hair.
At my age, I'm just happy to have hair.
I'm not there yet, Eddie. Let's slow the roll a little bit. Come on now. I mean, I don't.
Actually,
my
Jimmy,
hair just goes straight up.
Your hair is more like a microphone, right?
Yeah. That's probably a fair way to describe it.
Like you have just kind of a burr on top. No.
Or like somebody who just puts their finger in a socket. And there you go.
That's a little bit what it looks like.
That's more
today.
accurate. Yes,
Yeah,
I put a fork in a light socket, and this is how I woke up today.
I used to shave my head in the summertime. Should I do that again? I was completely bald. Did you know that?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I can't see you looking like a thumb.
Oh, no. Let me tell you something. I have a beautifully shaped cranium. I mean, like, I would get compliments all the time. I ended up growing my hair back out because I got tired of people coming up telling me how nice, they were like, you have a beautiful
I got to be honest, at the risk of Eddie accusing me for kissing up to you, I feel like that would be like Scott Van Pelt not wearing glasses anymore. Like, your overall look is... a staple of you.
Really?
I don't know that I can
imagine
my hair?
you.
Well, all of it, yeah.
Okay.
I can't imagine you bald. I'm like Eddie. I'm not saying you can't pull it off. I think that'd be jarring.
Here's the thing. I began shaving my head several years ago in the summertime because I wanted to prep for the fact that if I ever went bald, it wasn't shocking that people would be like, "Oh, well, he just occasionally shaves his head."
Sure.
So I just went with it.
That's nice.
And let me tell you something.
There's always a plan.
It was. It was like perfect, honestly. But I have too much hair product to let it go to waste, so I decided to grow the hair back.
Yeah, I understand.
Nonetheless,
the endorsements would have been through the roof.
That's right. Plenty of talk about the Colts over the course of the show today. Also, last night, and I'm glad that Nick Gardner is going to join us from the Butler Basketball Radio Network. As a matter of fact, he's going to do so in about 15 minutes. And one of the questions, and I think this is probably too harsh a question to ask, but would it be too harsh if I started with Nick? And I've known Nick a long time. I mean, he's a Northside guy. His sister's just below me from school when we were younger. And Nick and I talk, with some regularity. Is it too direct if I just start out by saying, Nick, you are, the color analyst for the Butler Bulldogs. We appreciate it. We're happy to have you on. I've been following what Butler's doing, and so I still don't know at this point. Are they good or do they suck?
I mean,
is that too direct?
I think the back end of it is a little harsh, but ultimately I appreciate you not beating around the bush, because that's the reality of what everybody's thinking about Butler. Like they go out and they win a nice holiday tournament during Feast Week, and they have that momentum, and we have John Fanta on the next week, and he's talking about how if they take care of business on the road against Houston, then he's a full believer in Butler. They don't do that, but then they start to get ready for Big East play, and they play a Summit League team in North Dakota State last night who handles them pretty much the whole night. Then Butler comes back from 20-plus to be up by, I think, 5 with like a minute to go, and then they wind up losing. And it's unfortunate because now for Butler, as much of a momentum as you were riding from that holiday tournament and feeling like you have a nice foundational resume going into Big East play to end your 6 year, be 7 years by the time we get to March, NCAA tournament drought, you've now lost to Austin Peay and North Dakota State, who, for Austin Peay and North Dakota State, some separation there. Austin Peay is like near the 300 level of rankings across the country, and North Dakota State significantly better than Austin Peay, but still bottom 140 of the nation. And so those are two, both at home, very head-scratching losses for a Butler team that you think from what you see on a nightly basis, should be better than that. So I think the suck part, admittedly, is harsh, but you're cutting right to the point, which is I don't know if this is a good basketball team or if this is a team that's just going to be up and down all year and ultimately be in the NIT. I don't know.
They did last night what I have mentioned with the Pacers, and that is when you build yourself, this is stating the obvious here, you build yourself that big a hole, and then you've got to exert so much energy to come back from it that then, and the other team is just kind of staying at the same level. You run out of gas down the stretch, right?
Yeah, I mean, and look, North Dakota State had a guy go off. Jakari White was incredible throughout that ball game. He had 6 3-pointers. And who knows? Maybe you look at this game and North Dakota State winds up winning the Summit and they get to the NCAA tournament because of that. And then it's like, okay, not as bad of a loss. But on paper, after what they did at the Arizona tip-off to win that, yes, they got rocked by Houston on the road over the weekend, which I think, Houston's a really good team. And I give credit for that being a non-conference game. That's one that you like to have, and it's not going to hurt you on your resume if you lose it. But these type of losses at home are incredibly head-scratching, which leave us lost for what the true identity is of Butler this season. Now they have a good opportunity again this weekend, and they're still going to have opportunities in a Big East conference that is loaded. You mentioned how much you love Marquette. Even with UConn's early season struggles, they're still a powerhouse. Like there are good resume-building opportunities still in the Big East, but if you're going to be a team that lives on the margins and is begging the committee to get you in on merit, you can't have losses 140 and below in KenPom. You just can't. And for those that don't know, that's one of the top ranking systems in college basketball still. You can't have those type of losses on your resume if you're going to be a team that's peering in from the outside hoping to get into the tournament. It's frustrating. Like if you're a Butler fan, you're frustrated with the lack of early season consistency, and you hope that Austin Peay and North Dakota State are just anomaly games, and maybe North Dakota State winds up being a really good team, and you're thankful for being in the Big East Conference where you can make up ground. But if you're going to have nights like this, it's going to be more of the same, and that tournament drought's going to continue.
Hey, Jake, it was Chris O'Donnell that was Robin when George Clooney was Batman. Jerry O'Connell was the star in Piranha. That's right. But and he married some supermodel, right? Jerry O'Connell? So
you're asking a lot from both of you.
Are you calling Emily Longnecker a supermodel, Jake?
What's that?
You calling Emily Longnecker a supermodel?
Emily's
your wife?
She could Jerry O'Connell, which would be you, went on to marry a supermodel.
Okay.
Now I just sent you guys a picture.
Jerry O'Connell's head's not big enough. Jerry O'Connell's head's not big enough. We can't. Current picture of day. Vern might have been, but
I'm telling you, if you watch Stand By Me, Eddie is 100% Vern. I just sent a picture to you guys of me with the shaved head. What do you think?
If you had a 5 o'clock shadow, I would think that's Jason Statham.
Who?
You don't know who Jason Statham is?
I could see that a little bit, Eddie. Sure. Muscular actor. I don't know. I mean, is in generally big budget spy fight movie type deals.
Sexy guy.
He's been in The Fast and the Furious, The Mechanic.
Yeah, okay.
Snatch.
I know The Fast and the Furious. Well, I'll take that as a compliment. One of the things in college basketball I think that is, that guy looks older than me. One of the things in college basketball that we are,
he's 57.
the world that we live in now,
sure,
is this. This time of year, I think, can be difficult or challenging because so many teams that by the end of the year, virtually all of them, I mean, everybody seemingly is still figuring out players that are because of the transfer portal. So there are teams that may be struggling right now, but they have the talent level across the board that once they kind of figure each other out, and I think that we are still in the figuring each other out period. Probably by now you should have a pretty good idea, but I think you've got to go probably into mid-January, into maybe even late January before you then feel like you have now seen and experienced enough things that if you have two key players on your roster that are playing with guys that they did not play with a year ago, that are transfers in, now you have a real idea who you are. And I think that we are going to see some teams. You had the stat yesterday, Jimmy, which was a good one, which is, and it's a little bit confusing, so let me simplify it here. if you were to make a list of every national champion from 2004 to present, the one thing that all of those teams have in common is that all of them, as early as week 6, during the week 6 rankings, found themselves ranked within the top 12.
Yep.
So they, 6 weeks into the season, already were amongst the dozen best teams in college basketball. And so they knew who they were fairly early. I think that as we go along now, we've entered a period into college basketball where that is going to be more and more tested, because you have a higher possibility that you're going to see teams that all of a sudden in late February, you go, nobody's talking about this team because they lost 10 games by mid-January, but they've won 9 of their last 10, or they've won 8 in a row, and they're really playing, they're just a different team, and all of a sudden everything comes together for them. I don't know, the example I'm going to give, and maybe it's a bad example because I don't know what their transfer portal situation was a year ago, but over the course of the season, nobody was talking about North Carolina State. But then from, when they got into late season and into their own tournament play and then the tournament, they really came together and figured out, and they played very well together.
Yeah, I mean, they won their conference tournament to get in, right? That was the only reason they were able to be a part of the NCAA tournament. They wind up making all the way to the Final Four. And to kind of, I know we'll rehash it with Nick Gardner here a little later in the show, but all is not lost for Butler. They're 7-3 on the season before conference play starts, and they still have one more opportunity again against Wisconsin this weekend at Cambridge. So, I mean, you have another opportunity. That would be a quad 1 game. Add it to your resume. Yes, it's quad season, baby. I'm starting it early. We'll get into that more in February and March. But my problem is, and this is just the area of the margins that happens sometimes with these resumes, I'd rather them be 9-1. Which is that loss to Houston, and you clean it up against Austin Peay. You don't lose that game at home. You don't lose North Dakota State last night. You can't go back in time and change that, but that's where the frustration is, because if you're not able to make the kind of ground that has escaped you at times in the Big East, you don't want your resume stacked up against borderline teams and asking them to separate when one of the reasons they might separate is, wait, you lost to who at home? What happened? Like that, it is putting you one step forward, 2 steps back with the Arizona tip-off win and then those 2 losses. But, as you mentioned, Jake, very early in the season, they're just 10 games in, and the Big East Conference is abound with good win opportunities for them. I just think that they could have put themselves in an even better position than they are right now.
So would it be too direct if I ask Nick, so is Butler good or do they suck?
No, I think you're fine. I mean, you have to judge your relationship with Nick. If you think it's good enough for that, he'll understand you're being slightly flippant.
That seems a little direct.
It's to the point. Because the other way to ask it is, hey, is Butler going to struggle this year, or are they a good team that just had 2 bad losses? That's the way to clean that up. And I think you're just being direct and to the point. But also, I would only ask that to somebody if I had a decent relationship with them and they knew I was being somewhat flippant.
When it comes to asking people for something and feeling uncomfortable about it, you don't have to worry about that if you go to Jiffy Lube and you're wanting $20 off your signature service oil change and a free tire rotation. You don't even have to ask for it. All you have to do is point out to a Jiffy Lube team member when you show up that you are a member, this is assuming that you are, of a monthly car wash program, regardless of which car wash company you're talking about. You have that sticker in your window. You have it down on the license plate, anything that shows that you are a member of a monthly car wash program. And Jiffy Lube's going to show you some love because they're going to respect the fact game knows game. And they're going to say, you know what? You like the outside of your car. We want to make sure that we're taking care of the underbody of it and the tires as well. So we are going to go right now and give you $20 off that signature service oil change between now and the end of the year. Just a couple weeks left for you to take advantage of this. All you have to do when you go to Jiffy Lube, any Central Indiana Jiffy Lube, point it out to the Jiffy Lube team member and $20 off your signature service oil change and a free tire rotation at Jiffy Lube, where you have all your vehicle maintenance needs addressed and you never need an appointment. We have an appointment with Nick Gardner. He is the color analyst for Butler Basketball's radio network, and he is going to join us next. This song was a phenomenon.
Oh, man. Was it ever?
And it was kind of like Fruity Stripes gum. It was awesome until you got to the parking lot, and then you're like, I think I've had enough. And the flavor went away, but it didn't. It just stuck around and was there and there and there. I remember when the St. Louis Cardinals won the National League Central in 2000, and I was doing the broadcast for the Cardinals TV broadcast, and they had me interviewing fans. And it was right when the song was at its apex, and I was trying to talk to fans. You know, like they were celebrating because the Cardinals just clinched the division, and all anybody wanted to do was jump up and down in front of the camera yelling, "Who let the dogs out?" For 2 hours, I interviewed every like drunken St. Louisan singing "Who let the dogs out." So I almost have like a PTSD over it. The Macarena was a similar phenomenon that swept the nation, by the way, 5 years before.
Both, though, are safe for either sports venues or weddings now. They're good. They're fine.
You're right.
They've reached the point where their overplay has died down.
What about that chicken dance?
Yeah, I think that's in the same realm. Electric slide, the whole thing.
I made a pact to myself because I'm what one would refer to as a broadcast professional, that I'm going to be more not as direct to my question to Nick Gardner to start things out, okay?
Called an audible, all right.
I am, in fact. Nick Gardner joins us now. He is the color analyst for the Butler Basketball Radio Network. And the Dogs last night, a tough one to North Dakota State, not just because they fall to North Dakota State at home, but also because at one point they were down big. You can give them credit for coming back. You know, there are other losses. Austin Peay, obviously, is another one that you feel like is going to be a real ugly loss by the end of the year, but they have some good wins as well. So the question is, Nick, do we know yet exactly what we're getting with Butler night in to night out, and whether or not we're dealing with and watching here a team that is going to be one to contend for the upper half of the Big East, or are we still seeing a team that is really one that could struggle all year?
I think you don't know. I think the consistency isn't there, Jake, to answer kind of the first part of that question. And last night is a great example of that. I mean, you couldn't have had a different looking first and second half when you talk about how the Dogs played. So I think there's still some questions in the air. And really, look, you've got two answers. I think the most consistent, the three top scorers are the guys who have been most consistent throughout. Pierre Brooks, Jamil Telfort, Patrick McCaffrey. Those guys have been pretty consistent. And I think you're still trying to fill those spots. And the best wins the Dogs have had, you've had kind of point guard by committee and guys stepping up and making plays. And, that certainly just wasn't the case last night. But I think there's some head scratching to go around because the inconsistency is puzzling.
Nick, is it solvable? Like, it's very early in the season, so all things you could say, if your glass half full, are solvable. But you and I talked about the point guard worries and issues to start the year, and the Arizona tip-off is a great win, and a lot of people nationally viewed it as a turning point potentially for Butler to ride it in to Big East play. But focusing just in those areas, especially point guard play, is any of it fixable, or is it just going to have to be survivable?
I think it is fixable because of what you saw in Arizona, Jimmy. I think, you look at that win over Mississippi State, Landon Moore made plays. Colby King was really active. Goose, like just more guys were able to step up and make some plays. And so it is fixable, but then you're getting into the consistency, right? Like, is it fixable every night, night in and night out? And I think that's why, a lot of Dogs fans are, you see what you saw last night, and then you look at the schedule coming down the road, and you're thinking, man, this better be fixable. Otherwise, it's going to be a really long year. And so I think it is. I think it's just like, how can you get those guys to perform night in and night out, kind of regardless of matchup, and be able to bring that energy and produce that on the court? And last night, you just let a team get in rhythm, and you just had to exert too much energy to come back that you weren't able to close it out late.
Nick, I realize Nick Gardner is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. I realize it's not like Butler just joined the Big East 6 weeks ago, right? But it is a league that has size, has defensive intensity, and has, a lot of athleticism across it. When you look at what Butler has played so far, do you feel like they have seen teams that have good representation of what they're going to see in conference play? Has their schedule, regardless of wins or losses, has their schedule in terms of schematically what they've seen properly prepared them for getting set for the conference?
Yes, I think it has. I think when you look look now, again, the results weren't great in a couple of those matchups, but Houston is a team, right? You're going to see some teams like that in the Big East. And I think Mississippi State is a team that's going to be like similar to that, where they've got some athletes that are really going to try to press you, try to heat you up a little bit. So I think they have. And I think in those contests, to like the physicality, kind of the just having more force to how you're playing on both ends of the floor is what separated success and failure for the Dogs. When they have some force and are able to play with it, you get a win like Mississippi State. When you're on your heels a little bit and you aren't playing with that force, you see what happened down in Houston.
Nick, where would you say the biggest strength for them is offensively? Because I know we've talked about it a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but returning of your top scorers, 4 of them are players that have been in the building already. You add McCaffrey in there, and there are moments where there's real flow for them offensively. When you look at them, as Jake mentioned, with Big East play on the horizon, yes, the game against Wisconsin still to play this weekend, what is the backbone offensively for this team?
I think the biggest key is that flow and rhythm. I think, like, obviously your strengths are with those wings when you talk about Brooks and Telford and McCaffrey. And when you're able – when the offense is able to get some paint touches, drive and kick, and the ball just starts moving and they're just kind of playing basketball, for lack of a better term, the experience, the skill, and the ability is on display. And that's why you've seen this team they have a lot of assisted made field goals, because when they're humming offensively, the ball's moving and they're finding open shooters, and there's a bunch of guys who can make shots. So to me, the key is the ball can't get too sticky. When teams get up and pressure you and deny you, it's harder to move the ball and reverse it from side to side. And so I think that's going to be the biggest key for Butler is teams are going to try and take away that ball movement. How do you ensure that you can still get movement, get paint touches, and put these defenses in rotations when they're trying to take that away from you?
You know, it's one thing to have, to go 8 or 9 deep in terms of minutes played. It's another thing to go 8 or 9 deep in terms of really good production. Do you like the depth that Butler has?
I think it's necessary depth, right? We talked about kind of like your 1 and your 5. You're kind of doing it by committee, and a lot of it's matchup based. And so, there'll be nights where, you may play 8 or 9 guys, but when you look at the rotation, he's finding what works and kind of riding those guys late. And so, look, everybody would like to have some more depth, but I think the versatility of this depth is what is needed for this group. And you're going to see him. I think you'll see these guys, they'll match up a little bit more. And, like, depending on the style and the variety, you can switch lineups a little bit.
Nick, when it comes to coaching, and sometimes you can get a hybrid of the two styles I'm about to talk about, but some coaches, they are very clear in the way they want to play, and they are outstanding at getting guys to buy into that and doing it their way. Other coaches are outstanding at figuring out the skill set of the roster they have and what scheme would be best based on what guys are going to respond to, and being flexible of moving away a little bit from one style to another based on what the roster needs or the opponent needs. Which have you seen most define Thad Matta?
I would say he would lean more towards the here's my personnel, let's figure out schemes and things that fit with this, while still having an idea of how he wants to play. So that's kind of a cop-out answer. But I would definitely say he would lean more towards, all right, here's our group. What's the best formula to win with this group?
Do you think motivation – you played, right? I mean, obviously you've been around the game a long time. In your opinion, Nick, is motivating a player is the more effective approach figuring out and having the skill of figuring out what each individual guy responds to, or having a very set discipline of here's how I'm going to be, you need to learn to respond to it?
I'm of the opinion. I think everybody reads things differently. So I think you've got to figure out how to connect with that person individually. There's some guys you can just go over and whisper something to, and they'll react to it. There's some guys who maybe they need to be called out and be held more accountable in maybe a more public fashion, things like that. So, it's funny, Jake. I was just talking with a buddy. how you guard pick and rolls and how you do the tactics, that's all well and good and important. But the name of the game of coaching is having your guys ready to go 30 nights and being ready to go each and every night. And it's like, how do I connect with each of these guys to have them ready to go no matter the opponent, no matter when the game is, no matter what, like, how do I have them ready to fire and play the way that we practiced and the way that we need to each and every night? And a lot of that has nothing to do with pick and roll defense. It has to do with connecting with individuals and finding ways to motivate them and making sure your team is ready each and every night.
Nick, compared to previous seasons, what should Butler fans' confidence level be heading into the Big East once this game against Wisconsin wraps up this weekend? I don't even mean to win the thing. I just mean in terms of the overall state in the conference.
I think it's going to be very similar to what we've seen in the past, Jimmy. As much as we hate some of these results, like, it comes down to maybe a handful of games, right? Where if you can go get one on the road against one of the top 2 or 3, like, that's going to jump you. It's going to be all bundled up like it usually is. And so, like, one little game can separate you. I mean, I harken back to last year. This team was sitting in a good spot and then went through a gauntlet there, lost 6 straight. And like, if you could have gotten one of those, would it have been different? So I would say the outlook is similar to what we've had in the past. Now, getting there, there've been a few more bumps in the road in this non-conference maybe than anticipated, but we've also seen some good wins. So I wouldn't say it's much different than in the past. You're going to have to compete night in and night out. And if you can go get one, at Marquette, for instance, next week, if you can beat a UConn at home, man, that can jump you up kind of above the middle of the fray and give yourself an opportunity to hear your name in March, possibly.
About to get fun for Butler because you got Wisconsin coming up Saturday and then at Marquette, as Nick had just mentioned, then followed by UConn, Villanova, St. John's. You get right into the thick of league play. So it'll be fun to follow what happens with Butler. And, Nick, I don't know if you know this or not, but we've already made the executive decision that we're going to lean on you a lot and have you on all the time to talk about it.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm all in, man. So whenever you need me, thanks for having me on.
That was very resounding. you never sounded more thrilled.
Look, you got to understand, like, coming off of last night, I'm a little jaded, right, with things this morning. So I need a little more time.
You and me both. You and me both, Nick.
Nick, I get it, and I'm not trying to kiss up here or soften it. I do think that they're coming. And listen, I know that they didn't play well, right? But when you look at it to the casual peripheral flyover fan, they look at it, they go, North Dakota State, really? Because the name doesn't jump out at you at all. They've been a decent program, have they not?
Yeah. No, they have. They've been a really good program. And, like, when you look at how they play, like, that's a team, if they sneak into tournaments, they'll upset teams. They make a bunch of threes. They shorten the game. It's a low possession game, so it's a small margin of error. And that's a team that can beat people. So the other thing, too, is, like, there is something to be said for having such a bad first half and being able to flip the switch and get back in that game. Now, you weren't able to close it out. But, man, they had something going in that second half, and you just wish you were able to finish the last 3 minutes a little differently. But hopefully you can take something from that and be able to turn around and be ready to go as things get real starting this weekend.
Maybe a win next time, Nick. After a win,
that's right.
We'll get you.
Right. After a win, we'll get you on. How's that? Pep in the step.
Sounds good.
All right, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Nick Gardner from the Butler Basketball Radio Network. Big show lined up in terms of the NBA as well. Bobby Marks going to join us coming up bottom of the hour because there's a question that is driving Jimmy crazy about the Pacers. He wants to make a matter of fact, his direct words, if another person sends me this, I swear I'm about to snap, is what he said. We don't want Jimmy to snap, so I'm going to have to let you know what it is that people are asking. And then Eddie, of course, chimed in with, it's actually a pretty good question, though. And I had to separate the two of them during the break. So we'll let you know what it was.
It just all goes back to our trip to
Exactly. We're still mad about the Charger.
I'm still
it's
mad
the whole
at
thing.
him.
Yeah.
I thought the two of you were going to take this little trip where therapeutically you were going to discuss about
You'd think
dealing
it would
with
have
me.
had a bond,
You were
right?
going to get away from one another.
Yeah.
You come back, and now all of a sudden, literally, it's like I'm sitting here, and it's like Father knows best. I got to, like, separate you guys and all kinds of stuff.
Even our disdain for you privately couldn't motivate us over the fact of the charging issue we had.
I'm trying to create chemistry here.
I know.
So we're going to have a therapeutic talk it out session about what's bothering Jimmy next. Really, Eddie?
It's also a
I
different
found it.
version.
Yes, it's the 2000 St. Louis Cardinals who let the cards out.
Oh, you tracked down that one. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, then I respect the troll then. I tip the cap. Well done by you.
Come on. Really? I'm telling you. The entire by the way, if anybody, you know what? Here's the level of PTSD that I have from that.
That makes the Bills make me want to shout sound like Mozart. I mean, what are we doing here?
I have somewhere, and I'd have to find it. I've mentioned this before. I have somewhere a bottle of champagne from the 2000 Central Division Championship for the Cardinals in their clubhouse that they pop and they pour and all that. I think Will Clark might have signed it, but it has a thing on it that says St. Louis Cardinals 2000 National League Central Champions. Somewhere I have it.
Did he put "Who Let the Cards Out" on the bottle?
Yeah, I mean, probably, right? That, and then Jim Edmonds, who was a cool dude, but Jim Edmonds was going through a huge Limp Bizkit phase, and all they ever played in their clubhouse was Limp Bizkit and Nelly. Like, you walked in there anytime, and Nelly, because he was from St. Louis, was constantly playing in there, unless Edmonds had control of things, and then it was Limp Bizkit. It was a good group, a fun team, though, and a good group of guys, admittedly. Speaking of good group of guys, I think the Pacers have that. They do have a guy on their roster that doesn't get a lot of playing time, but is kind of like the Willie Stargell Pops of the roster, the guy that seemingly keeps everything in order, keeps everything in line, is the mentor-type player. And, Jimmy, several people have asked us a question now that you finally completely snapped. I've never seen anything like it.
People keep asking, when is it going to arrive at a point where the Pacers will move James Johnson from the active roster to a coaching position? And it's asinine to me for a lot of different reasons. First off, if the Pacers think about a lot of things, if that was a priority for them, it already would have happened. Secondly, and there's a great piece that Tony East did earlier in the summer when they signed him to a new deal. It talks about what you just outlined, his veteran presence, him not letting things slide in practice, being an active body throughout practices, having that veteran presence and that strong, no one's going to mess around with him attitude that you've been asking more of this roster, Jake. And a lot of that, at least in terms of practice reps, like, don't get me wrong, the Pacers could in theory, but you're not going to have, I would think anyway, an assistant coach running 5-on-5 actively if you were to move him over. Like,
Gennaro Pargo does.
People are going to throw out like hypothetical ideas of what you could maybe do with an assistant coach that's just not factual on a consistent basis for what you're going to do to an active member of the roster. On top of that, they already have one open roster spot on a team that is operating at a cap deficiency. They have a couple of exceptions they can utilize, but nothing of like grandiose opportunity that two open roster spots would then allow you to go get a guy. Like, I get Pacers fans looking at James Johnson and saying, well, he doesn't really do anything because he doesn't play. They would be ignoring his veteran presence, but sure, he doesn't play. Go put him as a coach and then open up another roster spot and go get somebody. The problem is, I don't know they would be incentivized to go get somebody else, in part because they already have that one roster spot open, and secondly, they don't have the cap space to go get somebody that would be a significant upgrade over the roster spot James Johnson is occupying.
There are two other things that come into play here. One of them being when you have every team, and I don't care whether you're talking about college, whether I sound like Jim Mora. I don't care whether you're talking about a high school team, a college team, a junior college team, let alone an NFL team. But every team, regardless of the level that you're playing, has a player on the roster that is kind of the glue guy that either keeps things in line when the coaches aren't around, or when players are frustrated with the coaching staff before the player goes to the coaching staff, can go to them, and that guy's a veteran presence that can, in the locker room, they can be like, look, man, here's what I think is going on, and just kind of be like the union rep, for lack of a better phrase.
Sure.
Okay?
Udonis Haslem.
Yes.
And every team has that. When you move, no matter, as soon as you move a player to the coaching staff, the level of love and respect for that guy may still be there, but there is it changes the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It just does. It changes the relationship. And coaching staffs love and need a guy on the staff that they feel like is an extension of them, but is still keeping the cohesiveness of the team, because they feel like we all have in any job that you have, like the employees that get together and you vent out or talk out frustrations that you might have with the boss or with the structure or whatever else, no matter what line of work you're in. And the second that one of the people that is your confidant moves into middle management, you're like, I don't know if I can talk to them as much. And that's exactly what would happen. That's number one. There's another aspect of this, though, that I think the everyday fan can relate to as to why thinking that opening up the roster spot could help the Pacers and why that might actually not be as big a slam dunk as you think. And it has something to do with what 90% of the people hearing my voice right now have done 5 times in the last calendar year. And then you go, yeah, it makes sense. We'll tell you what that is, and then Bobby Marks is going to come up about 35 minutes from now. all day now? Or are we just going to play these
We're just trolling.
horrifically
We're trolling.
cheesy songs? And listen,
You mention it, it will be played.
I am very hesitant to say this. I'm only going to say this once, and I don't know who needs to hear it. And I'm not trying to be the killjoy of Indianapolis.
You enjoy working with me every single day, and you just don't want to publicly admit it?
No.
You actually love me?
That's clearly not it. There is. I don't know this, actually. I've not worked around other teams. I can't imagine that there is a fan base over the last 20 years who has inspired more horrifically bad songs about them than the Indianapolis Colts. They're so bad they're good, but like the Bengals, I take that back. The Bengals had some jackass a couple of years ago that decided to put together some like hip hop song about the Bengals and about like, get crunk or whatever, like when that was a term. And it was so bad that it was halfway entertaining, but it was just – now, it was better than that flatulent Bengal song they have where the Bengal is making noise that sounds like he had too much Taco Bell Cantina the night before with Matt Verderame. But nonetheless, if you feel inspired to write a rap song about your favorite sports team, and you think that, like, you're going to be the one that it takes off with, there's probably a reason why your rap writing career is just around, like, an NFL team. And invariably, it is never as hardcore or as cool as you think it sounds. I'll just leave it at that. When it comes to
he's going to play that Bengals song now, right? Like, you've invited that into that. I'm just telling you.
No, we're going to go over and take control of Eddie's computer.
I'm not even sure which song you're referring to.
Well, probably for the best.
The flatulent Bengal?
We played it on the air before because Jake made a point of emphasis on it one day over the summer.
It's like the Bengals' long-standing. It's the team song as opposed to just some moron with a Casio keyboard that suddenly thinks he's Mozart, which is also you get some guy that suddenly thinks that he's I'm just this incredible songwriter. I'm Bob Dylan, but mixing it in with hip hop lyrics to get everybody crunked before the game, and it's terrible. They're all terrible. All of those songs. I hope I didn't offend anybody with my rant. So when you guys have played fantasy football, most people listening have played fantasy football,
Not
right?
well recently, but yes, I have played
Okay.
fantasy football, yeah.
So when you play fantasy football, you invariably, and everybody does it, you got your team and you're like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that somehow or another I signed up for a league where I've got to have 3 starting running backs. And I'm in a 15-team league, so that automatically means there are 45 running backs taken. And yet, this guy that I got some running back, and he's like the third down option for the Arizona Cardinals, and he's okay. He's Andre Ellington, right? He's okay. And then you say, you know what though? I'm going to be. I'm Bill Pullian here. I'm going to think outside the box, and I'm going to outsmart everybody because I was reading about a team that that's out there that's their quarterback has got an injured thumb and nobody realizes it, so they have to run the ball more. So I'm going to make a change. I'm going to add another running back to my roster in my last running back slot here, and this is what's going to really, because I don't want this guy that's just a third down option. So you really outthink yourself that you're going to go out there and you're going to get now, you're going to free up a roster spot and you're going to go get this third running back. And then you pull up the available players and you're like, wait a minute. The highest average estimated production for any of these guys is a 3.6. And starting running backs usually get me a 12. And you're like, oh, gosh, now I see why these guys were all available. Like, this guy here hasn't played in 3 weeks. This guy got 2 carries for 7 yards 2 weeks ago. He's available. He's listed as the third best running back available. And then you say to yourself, gosh, I'd forgotten, and I didn't think about the fact that if I'm looking to fill the third running back slot in this league with 15 teams in it, then basically I'm just recycling the same lack of production. And for people that look at the Pacers roster and say, why do they have a guy on the roster that doesn't get any minutes? They should get rid of him and free up a roster spot. And the answer is because whoever it is that they are filling that roster spot with is probably somebody who brings the equal level of minute production to the game and to the floor than does James Johnson. And in addition to that, you're saying to yourself, yeah, but Johnson only gets on the floor when they're up or down 30. Like, it's a total waste. Except for that the guy that you would be replacing him with is a guy that probably is only going to see the floor when they're up or down 30. Yeah. And in addition to that, he doesn't know the players on the roster. And if you think that knowing your roster and knowing the chemistry of guys on the roster is not a valuable asset, then look at, for example, the numbers and the production of Tyrese Halliburton. I'm not saying now per se that this is a factor, but in the immediacy following like Buddy Hield's trade. I mean, there's a reason when Buddy Hield came here, those two, Halliburton just felt comfortable with his guy on the floor, right? It's like when you see rescue animals and they're like, these two have bonded and need to be adopted together. There are times where players just have somebody that presence helps them. It makes them, it allows them to just have a sounding board. And you don't always, not every team has that. Not every Pacer team has had that. Not every Colts team has had that. But there is a reason, clearly, when it comes to, this is the best way I can say it. When it comes to athletes, and it comes to sports in general, regardless of sport you're talking about, we, the fan, the person who pays a ticket to go to the game, the person who goes out to have a beer and watch the game, the person that sits on their couch and watches the game, we can all, you don't have to be Phil Jackson or Matt Painter or Norm Held, no matter what level you're talking about. You don't have to be that guy to be able to see in game production what players are valuable and what players are not. But in terms of the away from the box score contribution, and by that I mean in terms of players with their psychological impact, the emotional impact that they bring to a team, their ability to facilitate and cement chemistry, their ability to calm down players when that player needs to be calmed, or lift up players when that player's energy is down. In terms of guys like that, that's the one area that a front office or a coaching staff would know better than fans, because we're not in practices, we're not on the bus, we're not on the flight, and we're not in the locker room. And so for that reason, while we can be critical of a franchise for why are they playing this guy over that guy, or why are they putting too much emphasis on this guy's ability to handle the ball, because I can see with my eyes that this player's a better ball handler than this player, or this player's a better rebounder than this player. But in terms of this player's a better whisperer than this player, only those that are intimately involved with the franchise away from the cameras and the fan base would know who those guys are. So you would have to trust that there's a reason that James Johnson has been brought back and kept around on numerous occasions for the Pacers.
Also, I would argue if they were going to make the move that has been thrown out again ad nauseum to me by Pacers fans of when are they going to move him to the coaching staff, they had a decision on that. They could have done this offseason. He was not under contract anymore. You are evaluating at that point in the offseason everything that's in front of you, from new bodies you want to bring in, guys you want to keep, any real modifications you want to make to the roster. They chose to bring him back. They chose to give him another 1-year deal, make this his third straight season a part of the Pacers. He's been, prior to this season, made 28 appearances in the 2 seasons prior with the Pacers. You knew what you were getting out of him, and it's not somebody that is contributing on the floor. It is someone that's a veteran presence, that has that intimidation factor, that knows the team well, that's incredibly well respected throughout that locker room. If they were going to do that, it would have happened in July. They didn't. They brought him back. They spent pennies on the dollar to get him because it's $3 million against the cap for them. It's near veteran minimum, right? Like it's not consequential dollars for them. If they were going to make that move, they would have done it instead of re-signing him, been like, hey, listen, James, we need that spot for another player. How would you like a coaching position? It's just not something they're going to do mid-season, which is why the question bugs me more than anything, because
I've never seen you get this
it's just not
upset
going to
about
happen.
something.
Like,
Don't you need to open up a coaching roster spot as well?
Well, you're making my point for
staff?
me in that regard then. Like, I
Well, it
appreciate
depends
that.
on whether or not it's IU basketball or not, because they have 27 assistant coaches.
Eddie, the reason I didn't bring that up is because I don't know. That's a fair question. But if you do need to open up a spot, that's another reason for why it wouldn't happen. There are certain things, I guess, in my realm of things that bug me when something is asked repeatedly, when it seems like such an obvious answer to said asked question. It's like, maybe we need to bring the hammer down and outline the fact the Pacers still clearly value him enough that they would offer him a low contract just for his presence, when if they wanted to give him a different role and open up that roster spot, it would have happened in the offseason, and it didn't, so move on.
By the way, and I'm asking this out of genuine curiosity. Jimmy, I would like for you to do me a favor, please. Please Google for me Purdue. We'll go with, if I'm going to go with Indiana, give me you want Purdue or Butler? Which one do you want to take on? Purdue? We'll go with Purdue because they went to the national championship game last year, right?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Or would you like to do another big program? Kentucky, Kansas, North. Are we going to go with Purdue? Purdue's a big program, right?
Let's keep it regional. Sure. Let's go Purdue.
Do me a favor and Google for me Purdue University basketball coaching staff. I noticed this yesterday, and I'm curious because you were talking about creating an assistant coaching position, Eddie, at the NBA level. We're going to go position by position here in terms of title of people on a coaching staff, and I want to know who has more between Indiana and Purdue in terms of who Purdue officially lists in their staff, okay? I've never, and I'm not trying to be old guy yelling at clouds here, but I remember, I can still tell you, the 1987 national championship team for Indiana. You had Bob Knight was the head coach. You had the assistants, which were, if I'm not mistaken, at that time, it would have been Con Smith, Joby Wright, maybe Tates Locke, or Ron Felling. Then you had the graduate assistant was Dan Dockich. And you had Dr. Brad Bamba was the official team physician, and Tim Garl was the team trainer. I believe that was the entire basketball staff. Have you found it here yet, Jimmy?
Yeah, so Purdue obviously has Matt Painter.
We'll go one by one here. Okay, go ahead. Head coach, Matt Painter, Mike Woodson, right?
Sure. Are we going to go, just for the record, because I'm sure there's going to be a name on Purdue's staff I can't pronounce, and I know that the looming specter that is our...
Okay.
Let's just go position just for the sake of it.
I'm going to name a position. You tell me the Purdue equivalent.
All right.
For Indiana, associate head coach, Kenya Hunter.
3 assistant coaches. No equivalent title for that exact one of Purdue basketball.
Okay. Yasir Roseman, also associate head coach for Indiana. Then assistant coach Brian Walsh.
Yeah, Brandon Brantley, Terry Johnson, Paul Lusker, all assistant coaches for Purdue.
Okay. Armand Hill, director of basketball administration.
Elliot Bloom, director of basketball administration and operations.
Okay. Calvert Chaney, director of player development.
PJ Thompson, director of player development.
Cliff Marshall, director of athletic performance for men's basketball.
Would you say
just list for me the next thing that's that's listed?
Director of player personnel, Sasha Stefanovic.
Okay. Tim Garl, head athletic trainer.
Director of strength and conditioning, Jason Cabot. I'm sorry, Jason.
Jordan Holes, team and recruiting coordinator.
Chad Young, athletic trainer.
Steven Surface, director of basketball operations.
Nick Taruso, director of video services.
Mike Stump, video and player development assistant.
Carson Barrett, grad assistant.
Isaac Green, video and player development analyst.
Isaiah Thompson, grad assistant.
Nick Verdon, operations analyst.
End of list.
Bennett Munns, graduate manager. Nathan Childress, graduate manager. Jackson Taylor, graduate manager. And Anitra House, assistant to the head coach. Anitra's been there forever. Indiana has more than Purdue, but Purdue had more than I would have anticipated. Am I like an old guy here that I'm looking at and I'm going, how many people do you need on a staff? That's more than an NBA staff.
I'll say you must be the old guy. I'm taken aback by it too, but also I feel like as each year goes by, when I look at a general college basketball bench, I see way more bodies than I would have imagined that aren't playing, that are just coaches or have random assignments towards the program. So maybe it's just the way the game is modernized, Jake. The answer is more bodies, not less.
In some of those graduate manager, that's a little bit nitpicky if I'm saying that, because those are just, but I just look at it and I'm going, wait a minute, that's a massive staff. And maybe that is where we're headed now, because you do have things like analytics and video and those kinds of things, but it just doesn't feel like you're necessarily seeing the results.
I would think
here.
that combined with what NIL tasks and the transfer portal, you would want more bodies just to have. Like I wouldn't be surprised if you saw high-level scout teams and those type of positions occupied as the dominant position group for an administration in this era of college athletics.
I mean, admittedly, I'm assuming Kansas probably has like 30, right?
Yeah, I mean, if that's Purdue and Indiana, then you think, well, Kansas,
well,
Kentucky, UConn. I mean, I'm not downplaying those. Those are two big programs, but you get my point. Like, if two big programs like Indiana and Purdue are doing it, you would think that Kansas or North Carolina, whoever, also have, pretty big coaching staff.
Okay, Kansas, you got Bill Self, head coach, 5 assistant coaches, a director of ops, a director of scouting, and a senior advisor. So Kansas has officially listed 4, 8. They have 9 people listed for Kansas.
Well,
and
but you didn't list an athletic trainer there, and they definitely have an athletic trainer. So that means that Purdue is adding things to their coaching staff that aren't particularly coaching elements.
Yeah, that's fair, because I'm just going based on their website, right? And you're right. I mean, they probably – Indiana also listed graduate managers. But I just – again, I know that it's an observation that I'm late to the party here, but I just was like, wait a minute, like this is –
yeah, staffs have grown over the years. I mean, you think about it, especially with assistant coaching staffs. Like I remember, a family friend was on a D1 coaching staff, and they would always talk about how you're scouting so many different games ahead that one assistant coach is going to have the scout for Northwestern, and one coach is going to have the scout for Rutgers, and that's their assignment. And then you're going to go together at the table and share what you've scouted about that team and make a game plan because of it. So yeah, I mean, as rosters have grown and as coaching staffs have grown with it, you're not wrong. The staffs are definitely far bigger than they were 20 years ago, but I would also argue it's commonplace, especially amongst Power 5 conference schools in NCAA.
Listen, part of that is, and I understand it, I mean, these are corporations now. I mean, college athletics are corporations. I get that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The money that is brought in, it is pretty amazing. I mean, and reality here, okay? This is for example, yesterday the kid we were talking about that just signed with BYU and made the statement that I've got another year before I'm professional. No. No, this is professional basketball. These are corporations now, and I understand people talking about the lunacy of players and the money that they're getting. I hear it all the time. And I totally understand it. It's ridiculous that Indiana is paying a transfer portal center $1.25 million, and yet their music school, which is world-renowned, is not paying a violinist that we know. I mean, maybe they are. I don't know. Maybe the students that are in the symphony orchestra at Indiana, when they do their winter auditorium show, I don't think they get compensated.
That was always the argument I made in favor of NIL, because maybe the university's not paying them, but for a basketball player or a football player, you can't go charge $100 a pop to go, do whatever, like host a clinic for, a fantasy camp for adults that want to be around the basketball program or whatever. That's just one example. Whereas like me as a broadcaster, as a college student, I could go do freelance work for Adidas or whoever and get paid for it. Like the violinist at the School of Music could go get paid for it. Now that the tides have shifted the other way, you're right. Well, it looks weird.
The difference is this, though. The thought in the traditional thought from a lot of people is that college athletics, football, basketball, whatever it may be, that we are overemphasizing athletics versus the true intention of the university, which is the academia of a university, and that it's ridiculous that a quarterback or a point guard is getting a 7-figure contract to go play for that school when somebody that is going to develop a cure for a disease that is going through the undergraduate school is not getting that same compensation. But the pushback that I would give to that and the explanation that I would give is simple, and that is that the athletes, and I know that we always say student athletes, but let's just say the athletes now, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get to a point where these become G League teams. Kansas, Indiana, North Carolina, Duke, they're G League teams.
Look at Bill Belichick's selling point for the job at North Carolina. He wants it to be a developmental program to get kids directly to the NFL, like, to your point.
So we're no longer under the pretense that a player is coming there because of their strong business school or because they really like the program in, social work or whatever. What I'm saying is I don't have a problem with that for the following reason. First off, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But and players have been getting stuff since the beginning of time. And if you think that players playing under Bob Knight at Indiana didn't get some advantage, sure, they didn't get paid directly. They didn't get paid at all. And they did have to go to class. I mean, those things are all true. But there were definitely things that made life much easier for them in college, trust me, than the average student. But in today's day, the reality is this. You can squawk and balk all you want about the compensation that a prominent athlete is getting at a big-time Division I school, but that athlete now, with the television money that goes into the NCAA tournament, the college football playoff, the Big Ten network, the ACC network, the SEC network, the money that is funneling through, that is facilitated by these players. They are the gateway and the conduit that is allowing for that money to come into the university, which, yes, a big part of that goes into the athletic fund to continue that hopper, but it also gets distributed amongst the university. And then when you have a student who is a talented violinist, that the Indiana School of Music is going to allow that person to eventually work at Carnegie Hall, play at Carnegie Hall, or when you have a student that is from the backwoods of Texas and wouldn't normally have the money to go to college but has worked his tail off and now has an opportunity to go learn, and so he is given an academic scholarship to go to Texas A&M to study engineering. That money is facilitated by the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that are coming into the university because of the people that are willing to watch the kid that grew up down the street from him that is the point guard that's playing for Texas A&M and is bringing in all of this money from the NCAA tournament because they made a Final Four run. And therefore, when people balk at the money that is being given, you are paying these players so that you can increase the amount of revenue that you're getting that then is facilitated. It's trickle-down economics, quite frankly. That's what it is. Except for in this one, there's proof that it works, right?
Right.
And so that is the athletes are the conduits that then facilitate for opportunity for students on the rest of the campus, and that's why they get the money that they get.
The one thing I want to add to that as well, if how Jake painted that out, you're listening and you still don't agree with athletes making all this money and you're frustrated with it not impacting as much as you'd like other areas of an academic institution, don't just blame the players. The biggest thing that at family discussions, when I talk to people that aren't big sports fans but are in the know of, common news items, and I'll use this individual as an example, even though he retired last year because his was the most profitable of all the ventures. Nick Saban made $12 million right around there his last season at the helm of Alabama. That's not including endorsements. That's just straight from the university. The monopoly money that's been thrown around at universities is not just tied directly to players. It's tied to coaches. It's tied to the amount of money that have gone to either new stadiums or to building new weight rooms or to, renovating older stadiums, whatever it is. Like, there's billions and billions of dollars across all of college athletics that are going to more places than just the players. And I get it. Now there's this lightning rod of, it's not right what's happening in college athletics, whatever. But to your point, Jake, it's been happening to some extent since the dawn of time. It's
Correct.
Been happening forever. But if you're going to come at sports with frustration, if you're in that camp, I'm not, but if you, the listener, are, don't just come after the players. Coaches are making more, especially at state universities, as more as anybody else on the state employee payroll for a lot of states across the country.
Bobby Marks is somebody that hits the mark when it comes to understanding building NBA rosters and what teams might be looking for right now as we get into the period where you start talking midseason trades long before the trade deadline, but a couple of marquee names that are out there that might be interested in a new residence. We're going to talk to him next. Now, this one, I don't get the PTSD as much.
More time has passed.
Well, I also was, and I'm proud to say, and they told us that it was going to be something we'd talk about for years, and here we are. I'm still doing it. I happened to be at a San Diego Padre Los Angeles Dodger game in San Diego where we did the largest collection of Macarena, largest attended Macarena at one time. 60,000 of us did the Macarena, world record.
You still have the plaque?
That's right. And, they said, you'll talk about this for years. You were at the world record, and here we are.
It's in his
doing
closet.
Exactly that.
At his parents' house.
That's right. That's right. It's written on the wall. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so by hearing the Macarena on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. He is a front office insider for ESPN talking about the NBA and a return guest to this program. Bobby Marks joins us. Trade deadline's not until February, Bobby, but, the Pacers are one of those teams that you look at and you kind of wonder if maybe a tweak could be made here or there. So I will begin with this. Who are the 2 or 3 difference-making players that you kind of get the feeling might, in fact, be on the deadline, topic of conversation because they could look to go to another franchise?
Well,
did I silence him, Eddie? Did you bother him with the Macarena? I didn't know if that's my headsets.
He has Matt Taylor's phone.
That's
Believe it or
right.
not, Matt Taylor's phone has made the rounds across the nation to different media outlets.
Probably. This is about the time of day, is it not, where now, people don't know this.
The Gremlins come out.
Well, it's not Gremlins.
No?
I did some research on this. And this was the case at the last job that I had. We have 2 chipmunks that run things.
Yeah.
And this time of day, both of them, and we've been trying to wean them off of it, big smokers.
Yeah.
And they go out and the chipmunks take a smoke break, and when the chipmunks take a smoke break, everything goes to hell.
Yep.
Right?
That's
And
actually
so-
why Eddie was running around frantically the other day. He was chasing them, trying to figure out where they went.
We've got to go get them their nicotine lozenges from time to time when we really need to get things going because we never know
You
when they're
wouldn't
going to
believe
step
how
out, right?
tough it is to put a patch on chipmunks. They want no part of it.
That is true. Well, and the patches are tiny little things, right? And you just can't get enough nicotine on that little patch that goes on there, whether it goes on the chest or the elbow, whatever it might be. Eddie, and this I always get a kick out of this when this happens. Eddie starts feverishly working the phone lines, but it appears as though it's our guest line that has issue, the hotline, if you will. Okay, so Bobby's back. Bobby, thank you for being patient there with on our end of things. But let's get to that. Players that could become the topic of conversation in the 2024-2025 season version of the hot trade deadline name. Give me 2 or 3 that look like they're going to be those guys.
yeah, I mean, I think we're going to hear a lot about Jimmy Butler over the next, 2 months, 6 weeks here, as far as leading up until February 6th. I think certainly Brandon Ingram in New Orleans. I do think, though, and I think it's great for us to talk about and everything, but I think trades are going to be extremely difficult to make. For guys making north of $30 million, I think how the rules are and how the rules have become more restrictive here, it's extremely, extremely difficult to trade a $50 million player in this day and age, in this landscape of things. So we'll talk about it. It's hard to come about trading 5 guys in the middle of the year, but I think those are probably the 2 guys that will probably be kind of in the forefront here.
Now, with that, in terms of Indiana, and the Pacers are in a unique situation just because of, and Bobby, without boring people all the specifics of it, the trade that they made for Siakam, they do have this year's first-round pick, but they can't move a lot of the assets that they do have. Is Indiana a team that you hear in conversation either of having pieces that people might want or a team that could actively be looking to add pieces to themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of like in that in-between. I think, certainly, as you said, they still owe Toronto a first-round pick in 2026, so they can't trade this year's pick, and they can't move one until 2 years after. So I always said, if they're gonna make a move, I think it would be maybe somewhere focused around Obi Toppin, moving off what's owed to him, just to give you more. That would be more of a move towards the future because it does give you some flexibility. With Miles becoming a free agent this offseason, if the goal is to re-sign him. So that's the one thing I would probably maybe circle if I was a Pacer fan as far as Is there a kind of a lateral move where either you're trying to get an expiring contract or maybe you're getting a player with less money owed where it could give you some future financial? I think a lot of it has to do with just getting these guys healthy. I mean, I think that's whether it be, Neesmith and Nemhard and that group there. I know some of the guys are out for the rest of the year here, but I think it's just trying to get some consistency going and getting some of these guys, like more of a consistent lineup out there.
Bobby, looking at the entirety of the Pacers roster, to kind of build off Jake's question, Bobby Marks is our guest, joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. If I was to trade protect, remove them from the conversation, Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, and Benedict Mathurin, the rest of this roster, and I know they have to jump through hoops like many teams because of financial constraints and how you make a trade work, but the rest of the roster outside of those three, what are attractive pieces? I know you mentioned Toppin, but what are attractive pieces that could be movable for them if they were to take a bigger swing in terms of talent acquisition?
Well, I think Miles is appealing. The trouble with Miles is that he is kind of a true free agent. And what I mean is that he's going to be a free agent no matter what. He's not a restricted free agent. He's not extension eligible. Like, he will hit free agency next year. The value is that you get his bird right. So I think he's got, as far as if you're looking at the Pacers roster here, I think he's probably the most appealing trade chip, but that's trading away your starting center here. Nemhard's got a trade restriction because he signed that extension. Neesmith's on a really good contract here. I said it last year and I wrote about it. Like, this came from teams, and I know have not played well here. Like, they were kind of the prototypical how you build a roster in this modern day age of the CBA, where you have two players making, they're your two max guys with Siakam and Halliburton, and then you have a lot of these in between guys making between $19 and $5 million. Like, that's the perfect way to kind of build a roster as far as where they are. You're not going to go out and get another. You're not going to trade Turner and Toppin for a $34 million guy. Like, that doesn't work. It's extremely hard to go about how you build the rest of your roster.
Miles Turner, Bobby, to me, is really intriguing because I've always felt like he's I wouldn't expect you to necessarily know the fan base pulse in Indiana, right? But Turner's always been kind of that guy that fans either like love him or he's the whooping boy, right? He's the cause of all evil is Miles Turner. The way that Indiana wants to play, ideally when they're healthy, I think he's such an important piece for that because he facilitates transition, and then he can trail and hit the open three. I guess my question is, does his skill set translate into being a piece that would be coveted league-wide, or is he more of an esoteric skill set that limits the number of teams that would make viable offer for him?
Yeah, I think his skill set probably is someone who's your third best option. I don't think he's your number one or your number two, but I do think he's extremely valuable based on how you play. As far as you said, kind of if you're going to kind of get up and down, I think from a defensive stand, I think it's he's the type of guy, like, when he's probably not in an Indiana uniform, maybe if it's, let's just say, hypothetical, a year from now, the Pacers fan base is like, well, why didn't he do that here? You'll miss him when he's not here and everything here. So I think that's, as I said, like, that's going to be the most intriguing thing too, certainly from internally, as far as what you do with him over the next, the 6 weeks. The Eastern Conference will allow you to stay in this. They got to make up some ground to get into the top six, but they'll be a playing team. Like, they will be a playing team at the worst case scenario here, just based on, where the standings are here. So that makes it a little bit more difficult as far as, hey, we're going to be sellers and we want to kind of, you're kind of past that point of bottoming out to try to get a top draft pick. And I think when you go out and you sign Tyrese last year and you give Pascal that big contract, like, the goal isn't to, like, we're going to take a gap year and then we're going to, like, focus on next year. No, you just kind of have to kind of continue and kind of figure out where things are going to go here.
ESPN NBA front office insider Bobby Marks joined us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Bobby, sticking with Miles, I remember that piece where you talked about them being the prototypical modern cap operator with paying the top two stars and then filling out the rest of the roster accordingly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Miles would probably break that mold if he winds up being up there if you pay him this offseason. Does that then break that mold, part one, and then part two, if they do pay him, how do they still be financially viable having all that money tied up to those three guys?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the numbers say that if you keep this roster as is, and let's say you pay him, I don't know, north of 25, let's say $30 million, for example, you will likely become a luxury tax team. And yes, it does break that model as far as how every guy is slotted here. I think for Miles' perspective, free agency could be, not many suitors out there when you look at basically really Brooklyn as the lone team that has significant cap space, and they've got a center in Nick Claxton here. So I think I think the next few months is going to be really important for him to kind of play himself into a contract here. But I think it will be hard for Indiana to pay him. I don't know, let's say 3 years, $80 million, for example, and keep this roster intact, and then commit to paying the luxury tax. I think it's one thing to pay the luxury tax in a day and age when you go deep into the finals. I think if you get to a conference finals, you can say, yeah, the roster justifies it. But when you're a playing team and you lose, and maybe you don't make it to the first round, I think that's probably not the direction that you want to go in.
Now that the injuries and attrition on Indiana's roster have facilitated for minutes to be distributed around the team, do you believe that Jarris Walker would have the same level of intrigue league-wide that he did a year ago?
I do. I definitely do. I mean, especially when he's only in the second year. I think players like that, and especially players on rookie contracts, like he does, and it's controllable, have extreme value. And he's been well scouted, whether it be summer league or the body of work that we've seen here. So yeah, I do think that he would be extremely valuable.
Do you like him?
I do. I think he's intriguing. Just based on, I think he can play multiple positions here. I think I'm intrigued with his length. I want more. I do want kind of more of a body of work as far as string along probably more consistency or probably more minutes as far as from a playing standpoint.
And I just feel like almost more offensive assertiveness, because I do think that he has some skill set in scoring the basketball. But Bobby, it feels like he's timid to take the reins of that. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I mean, I think it's like, the window for him is here. Like, it's kind of like, I don't want to say now or never just because he's only in year two, but there's a golden opportunity for him to take advantage as far as, with Rick putting him out there.
Bobby, they clearly need front court help, do the Pacers. Losing Wiseman and Jackson, those are injuries that you can't plan out, but it's the reality of the situation they're in. When you look at their cap restrictions combined to what they could do to add depth at backup center, backup power forward, what are we looking at with their cap restrictions in place?
Yeah, I mean, they waived Moses Brown a few days ago, so they've got a little bit more flexibility, but that takes a center off their roster here. So, you're a few $1 million below the luxury tax, so you've got to kind of balance that as far as the goal is to stay under. I mean, the tax distribution, I know we're talking financially, it's the largest it's ever been, which is $19 million that each team is going to get. So that's a big number. Certainly, it's a big number in Indiana here. So when you're looking at the roster and you take your top two players, which was Tyrese and Pascal off, then yeah, I mean, you're looking at there's a lot of good contracts there. But as I've said, it's a little bit more challenging to. Basically a third of the league is basically eliminated from making trades because they're either in the apron or they're close to the apron, and you can't take back more money. And so it's just trying to find a trade partner and trying to get some depth, as you said. So as I said, the Toppin contract, which he just signed, that's probably your most valuable trade chip as far as trying to move that for something else out there.
Bobby, before we return you to your responsibilities at ESPN, which I know are vast, so I appreciate the time, I do want to ask this. In your opinion, or maybe just more so the chatter you hear, what is the reason for the inconsistency and the significant drop from night to night for Tyrese Halliburton?
I knew you guys were going to ask me about that. Oh, man, it is, and I think he's still a heck of a player here. I mean, it's like it's all over the place. I mean, everyone's going, oh, it's from the injury. I mean, but the injury is from we're almost like a year and a half from when he got hurt, right? Like, I mean, it's been a while since that injury. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to just confidence, right? I think there have been a couple of games here of late where his confidence, just from a shooting the ball standpoint, I think when he settles and he relies more on his three, I think it hurts him more. But I do think I would love to see him getting to the basket more. That explosiveness that we saw a year ago isn't there. Will it get there? I don't know. But for me, I don't think it's anything injury-wise here. I do think it, and he said it, he's very honest as far as when he's talking to the media and everything there. I do think it's, certainly from a confidence standpoint.
Bobby is the reason that Rick Smits is now the second most prominent basketball-related Marist College.
I don't know if I'll ever be that. I think the agents for Tommy DeVito, the quarterback of the Giants, might be the most popular Marist grad now. I think me and Smits might be number 2 and 3.
Fair enough. Well, Smits did make a cameo in Coming to America, so that keeps him up towards the top, regardless of how long it's been since he played, right? Bobby, I appreciate the time. Happy holidays to you. I know it's a busy time. Appreciate you carving out some for us.
Appreciate it. You got it. Thank
Bobby
you.
Marks, again, the ESPN insider for the NBA and front office in terms of the way things work. Going to be a busy time with him with the trade deadline coming up. Quick recess. We will come back. Eddie, you said that Joel A. Erickson going to join us about 15 minutes, right?
Yes.
Has he, he now knows who the beer fairy is.
I know.
We'll find out whether or not he's – I got him some new Glaros that is a new product. So
Really?
We'll get a beer review from him before we get into the Colts chat as well. Okay. I mean, what, are you turning this down because you're worried that you're going to like break some sort of a
Think YouTube has this in the archives?
I
Flagged
mean,
media.
I just pot this for a second, right? Okay.
Okay, hot take. The guitar riff's not bad. Everything else I could
Well,
but,
listen,
but the riff isn't bad.
The guitar riff is just he borrowed that off. Okay, here we go. And now, how about the rapping ability? You know, one thing about this song though, that I think is interesting. I was with Hagen the other night. And we were having this discussion, and a lot of it just has to do with the nature of the team itself.
The slow fade down.
That's right. But I do find this interesting, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. So Hagen and I were at an event the other night, and Kenny Moore was there. Kenny Moore's one of the more prominent players on the Colts roster, right? And Tyquan Lewis was with him. And a couple of people came up and like got a photo. But as you heard in that song, Dominique Rhodes, Peyton Manning, obviously Peyton Manning, right? Marvin Harrison,
Joseph
Reggie
Adai.
Wayne, Joseph Adai, Dallas Clark, Gary Brackett, Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis, Jeff Saturday. All of those guys were literally household names and faces anywhere in Indianapolis. And I know that they were going to Super Bowls, and that's a huge part of it. But, I mean, it didn't – Ryan Deem. I mean, virtually every positional starter in that era was immediately recognized anywhere in town and beloved. And I'm not saying that this year that the Colts are not still equally as loved. But how many players right now on the Colts roster, if they just walked into a restaurant on the northeast side of town, unannounced, would people immediately recognize? Like, oh my gosh, that's so. I mean, Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, probably Michael Pittman, right?
Buckner.
DeForest Buckner, that's a good one. Zaire Franklin, maybe.
Yeah. EJ Speed, maybe.
I think Alec Pierce has a pretty recognizable face. I don't know like if he would stand out in a crowd, but when I see him on when I see his facial profile, I could see him standing out.
Lawton.
I hard disagree there.
I was just naming a name here.
But I think if you said to somebody that's Latu, they would know who that is. But I don't know. I mean, and he's in his defense and in your defense. I mean, he's still in his rookie year, right?
I would think there's a stronger chance that if they've already been said, I apologize for not listening, and I should do better about that. But because of their podcast, Speed and Franklin, I think would be grandfathered in there. Yeah,
I don't think you think people would recognize EJ Speed by look.
I think there's a better chance because of them having the podcast platform, right? Like I think that.
I mean, they would know who they are, but I don't know, like
because they see him without the helmet. That's the biggest fight against football player.
I mean, it's a video podcast. I get it.
The biggest fight against football player recognition is that they wear helmets, right? And you don't see them as much. Whereas like facial features in baseball or basketball, you're picking up on more because there's not something blocking their head.
I went to a couple of Fever games, and our tickets or seats were behind the Fever bench, and EJ Speed was at 3 of them that I was at, and people were calling for him, like EJ, have a good season. Can I get a picture?
Well, did they announce him?
No.
Okay. Quentin Nelson, that's probably a good one.
Ryan Kelly.
I get. Let me rephrase this because I what I'm more getting at is this:
the average fan.
Not even that. What I'm more getting at is, and maybe I'm just jaded. I don't know, but I have a reason why I think the way that I do. Or that we Chris and I, in talking about it, came to one of the real factors here, but. The players might be recognized, but I'm talking about like the oh wow like star factor, like they walk in and everybody is coming up and asking for a picture and getting an autograph and like starstruck by it. And that factor, that era of team, you went 15, 20 deep of where it was like, holy cow, like oh my gosh, did you hear? Like, I was at work yesterday and Cato June came in and like everybody, like, people were going crazy.
But you know the reason for that. They're not winning.
Well, that's
like that carries
that
so
is a
much
big-
weight.
right.
To your point,
I think, and you guys are going to laugh when I say this, because I realize we live in a world now with social media, and that does change things. But I think that because we're in the bubble where social media exists, we think that means that everybody's on it, and in reality, it's like 10% of the population. But I do think, and I'm not trying. Hear me out. You guys are going to roll your eyes because I was a part of it then. But back then, 15, 20 years ago, local television news, every single TV station had a Sunday night 40-minute and oftentimes Saturday night 40-minute show, and everybody had their own rotation of guest players that would come in and sit on television and do interviews and they were usually fun, lighthearted stuff for 15-minute, 20-minute interviews where you're watching every night and you're seeing Hunter Smith at his house and Justin Snow, for that matter, and Dominic Rhodes, and all of them. I mean, like, each player had their moments where, and a lot of people, the vast majority of the city was watching them, and so they were TV stars in the market, and that allowed people to not only see what they look like, but just to get to know them off the field.
Got some breaking news, Jake.
All right.
According to Adam Smith of 24/7 Sports, Bill Belichick has finalized a deal to become the new football coach at University of North Carolina.
As I asked yesterday, I wonder if that means his girlfriend gets free tuition. Let's go, right? I'm just saying. Joel A. Erickson, by the way, joins us next. This one doesn't bother me as much. Although, is this the Jock Jams version where then all of a sudden we get like ESPN personalities in there, like welcome to the big show?
No, this is Rednecks.
Yeah, this isn't terrible. At least this wasn't. I mean, this is better than that last thing you played, whatever that was.
Well, the last thing you played was the Colts song. That's
Yeah,
not.
exactly.
That's like, what's that? What kind of bar is that?
I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, 9 Screaming Kittens is better than that song, whatever that was. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that introduction. He is with the Indianapolis Star, and
You're a cat person. You're not okay with cats screaming. Get out of here. You'll take the Colts song.
no. I didn't say screaming, just like meowing.
Oh, okay. So mewing. Okay.
Joel A. Erickson, who I know this much, has a very aggressive dog. Very aggressive and very strong.
Aggressive like in a happy way. Aggressive in like in a you have to pet him way.
How it's a golden retriever, right?
It's a golden doodle, but I cut him like a golden retriever.
Okay, and he's how old?
3.
He's very excited when the beer ferry arrives. This much we know, right?
Yes, he was like trying to go through the door to get to the beer ferry. he was like
Is he
like
an
the beer
alcoholic?
ferry definitely. He was like the beer fairy definitely wants to pet me.
No, he was after the beer. I could tell. Now, so I brought you Joel A. Erickson, who's a native of Wisconsin. I was just in Milwaukee. I brought back the new Glarus, and I brought you the typical spotted cow, but you wanted a new one that had you never had that one before?
I haven't seen that one. The gyrator is new, I think.
The gyrator. Okay, and did you try the gyrator? And if so, were you gyrating?
I have not tried the gyrator yet.
Okay.
I have not tried it yet. We had some. I had a bourbon meeting on Monday night and some other stuff. So I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm excited about getting to try it.
Just out of curiosity, you're a married fellow, right?
I am.
It may be wise to actually have the wife have the gyrator. You know what I mean? See where things go there. Anyway, all right. Thank you. Okay, so Joel, let's begin with this. For those that were not joining us and were not with us at the top of the program, there is update with a couple of key Colts for this week. We'll begin with Josh Downs. Does it look like Josh Downs might be a go in Denver?
It does. He's supposed to practice today. Now, what that means, it's tough to tell until we find out like Friday. But the fact that he's practicing at all makes it seem like he's probably got a good chance.
Okay, and then, obviously on the offensive line, they have been banged up. Where do things stand in terms of what we might see? Braden Smith had a personal issue, I know, and then Ryan Kelly has been out. Where do things stand offensive line-wise?
It sounds like Braden Smith is not going to play. It sounds like it would be a surprise if Braden Smith plays. So it'll be Matt Gonzalez at right tackle. It'll be Mark Lewinsky at right guard. Left side will be Nelson and Ryman. And then center, it's either Bordolini or Kelly, depending on how Kelly practices this week, is what Shane Steichen said. Obviously, those guys have kind of been a little bit interchangeable this year in terms of play. I know Bordolini's played pretty well, but I think if Kelly's healthy, it sounded like they were going to go back to him. His window to return opens today, which means he can practice without necessarily being activated.
Yeah, do you see much drop-off from – I guess if I were to ask you, the positions on the line where they've had injury, like Braden Smith, for example, if they're going with Gonzalez in place of Smith and they go with – and let's say they've got to go with Bartolini in place of Kelly if Kelly doesn't go, which one of those do you see as the bigger drop from starter to reserve?
I think, especially this week, I think it's Smith to Gonzalez. Like, Gonzalez played well at right tackle. I think he's better on the right side than he is on the left. But this is a Broncos pass rush that leads the NFL in sacks, and they're really, really good off the edge. There's guys people don't necessarily know, Nick Benito and Jonathan Cooper, but those guys have 19 sacks combined. They've got a rookie who's got 5. They're really, really good off the edge. So for this game specifically, I think that's probably true in general that there's more of a drop-off from Smith to Gonzalez anyway. But for this game in particular, it makes it much worse.
You mentioned Benito, and he's had a couple of times this season where he's also been able to pluck balls out of the air or have interceptions as well as disrupt things as a pass rusher. When you look at the dynamics of the Broncos defensively, you always think, even though Anthony Richardson isn't a rookie quarterback, it's a de facto rookie season for him, and he's going to be tested in a very different ways depending on defensive scheme. With guys like Benito that make up this defense for the Broncos, how will Richardson specifically be tested? What kind of different looks is he going to be dealing with?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that they blitz a lot. This is a blitz-heavy team. We've seen the Colts offensive line in the past struggle with the blitz, and it doesn't always turn into sacks because of the way Richardson plays. He's good at getting out of that stuff and kind of throwing incomplete passes, but it can definitely the passing game. You think about, against the Lions, they blitzed a lot, and he probably had like 6 or 7 throwaways. He didn't take the sack, but those are all incompletions, and you don't get any yards from them. So I think the blitz part of it is the biggest thing. And those guys off the edge are good, but we haven't seen them handle the blitz super great in a while.
Did you say you had a bourbon meeting Monday night? Is that what you said you had?
Yes.
Yeah, and is this just a bunch of fellows that sit around and talk about bourbon?
No, it's really more of the small group from my church that we're a part of also partakes in bourbon. We have a couple of guys who can get really good stuff. So the Bible study always involves bourbon.
See, now you hit behind the church. Now I feel uncomfortable trying to make further jokes there.
We have a couple of guys that can get really good stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And is that how they were actively recruited to become members of the church?
No.
What's your favorite bourbon?
It's probably E.H. Taylor.
Okay.
It's probably E.H. Taylor in terms of the ones that are generally easier to get. I also like Little Book. I like Little Book quite a bit. I tend to like the stuff with a little bit more heat on the back end.
Okay.
How's Big Book compare?
I was going to say, Little Book is good when studying the book, which it sounds like is what you're doing. But Jefferson's Reserve, have you had that?
I think so.
I don't know that it has enough heat on the back end, to be honest with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not one that comes up as much.
What's the most basic like mainstream bourbon that people will tell you like, oh, I really like this one, but you're really like, that's more of the commoners.
What's the poser bourbon? What's the poser bourbon? For those of us that don't know people that can get the good stuff.
So that's the thing is like
I like Woodford, but I feel like that's pretty mainstream.
Woodford would probably go in like the poser category.
There you go. See, all right, that's fine. That's fine. I threw it out there knowing that's where we're likely going. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's very.
Is Makers the same way?
It depends on if it's just Makers normal, yes.
Okay.
How about Buffalo Trace?
Buffalo Trace is pretty basic. Yeah, you want Buffalo Trace's better stuff.
Old
you want
Forester,
the Eagle Rare, the E.H. Taylor. There's a couple of Old Foresters I like. I like the Prohibition quite a bit. But yeah, you got to get like the stuff that's a little bit more off the beaten path. Like Makers, if you get the Heart's Desire, that one's really, really good.
Have you done the Bourbon Trail deal?
Yes, I did it last year.
Okay, fair enough.
I did it last year. We did Beam, Heaven Hill, Buffalo Trace, Makers, and Four Roses.
Here I was thinking that I was cool because I'm the beer fairy that delivers you beer. Little do I know you got the Pablo Escobar of Kentucky bringing you up the Renegade stuff. That's cool though. Don't worry.
The
about
Bourbon
it. No
Fairy
worries.
is actually the way to Joel's heart, believe it or not.
Hey Joel, can the Colts?
The thing is, I'm a bourbon poser. Like, I just ride the coattails of my friends who get good stuff.
All right, fair
so
enough.
you're secretly drinking Woodford, then, is what you're telling me? That's what's happening there.
If I listen,
no.
if I put Woodford, here's the thing: if I put Woodford Reserve in a bottle of the Little Book and then poured it for you, would you be able to tell?
I could tell. Oh yeah. Especially something like Little Book.
Okay.
Especially something like Little Book that's got some more spice and some more heat to it. Yeah, absolutely could tell. When we were on the Bourbon Trail, one night down there, we tried a bunch of like really fancy stuff like William LaRue Weller and all this other stuff. And then the next day was the Beam tour, and the first thing we got was like Jim Beam White, and it was like the shocking difference was like it was like, I want to pour this out, but that would be really, really bad.
What's the one that everybody goes gaga over? Pappy? Is it what's it called?
Pappy Van Winkle?
Yeah. Have you had that?
I have not had that one.
Okay. Some guy stole a whole pallet of it apparently one time down in Kentucky. It was a big deal. But anyway, can the Colts make the playoffs if they lose in Denver?
Realistically, probably not. It would take like a 3-way tie. It involves, I think, Denver losing out. I think they have to win to get in. I think you get into I think if they lose, they get into miracle territory where you need a miracle to end up getting in.
Do you think it's advantage Indianapolis to an extent? And this is, I'm going to say, taking Denver out of it because Denver would be in the same scenario, what I'm about to explain. But does it kind of help the Colts or Anthony Richardson in the fact that he is kind of so new to all of this and seemingly unflappable to the noise that it's almost like he goes into it without the nerve of knowing what's at stake? Or does he seem to be grasping the gravity of situations like this?
I think he tends to play better when they feel like they're in gotta-have-it situations. Like, the last drive against New England, the drive against the fourth quarter against the Jets. It feels to me like he plays better when the stakes get higher. At least so far. I know we haven't seen a ton of him, but it feels like that. And it'll be interesting to see if that applies to an entire game where we know going in how big a deal this is.
From offensive weapon standpoint, I know we already talked a little bit about the availability of Josh Downs, but we've already talked additionally Denver's defense, what they're going to try to take away. For the rhythm of this offense, getting off to a good start, what does the re-addition of Josh Downs, should he be able to go, do for the entire playbook for Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter?
Well, I think the biggest thing is against the blitz, it gives you an outlet. They don't necessarily have that guy when he's not in there because the tight ends have struggled so much this season. Running backs don't really catch the ball a ton. And A.D. Mitchell, his decision-making on routes has been questionable at times. So I think it gives you an outlet. It gives you a hot route where, Richardson knows where this guy's going to be and that he's going to do the same thing that he does. They don't really have that without him, and that's a really big deal against the blitz.
By the way, somebody asked if you're a bourbon snob. Are you a bourbon snob? I don't think of you as a snobby guy. Are you a bourbon snob?
I am. I've been made into one. Yeah, I've been turned into one. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm a cologne snob. Does that mean anything?
You're a what?
Cologne snob?
I think it can happen to anybody. If you get the really good stuff, it can happen to anybody.
But see, here's the thing. So for a long time, I was a big cigar guy, right? I still like cigars. And I sold cigars, and I knew cigars in and out, and I'd had every kind of cigar. And then I realized, Joel, that instead of being a cigar snob, I came to the epiphany that the best cigar was whatever was the best one for you. Now, it doesn't sound like that you agree to that and adhere to that to bourbons because you want people to be drinking the good stuff that your friend gets, right?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm not like a good first source here because I'm not the one who's doing the procuring and everything like that. But just in them teaching me the world of bourbon, it is the really good stuff is really good.
Do you believe that the bye week coming? Joel A. Erickson of the Indianapolis Star is our guest. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Sometimes a bye week can come and you say to yourself, man, this team needed it. They limped into it. Other times it comes and you say, boy, it's too bad because they were really starting to kind of hum along. And I don't mean in terms of wins and losses, but they just finally seem to have kind of figured things out and come together a little bit. You would rank this particular bye week in terms of how badly the Colts needed it or needed to avoid it. How?
I think they needed it because of the defense. I think more than anything, because the offense got its reset with the whole benching, not benching, bringing Anthony Richardson back thing. I think the defense needs it. You look at, they've given up 26.5 per game over the last 4. They just gave up 200 yards to a rushing yards to a New England team that isn't that good at running the football. I think the defense needed the reset, and by extension, the whole team needed it for that reason.
So are we looking at the Richardson – are we going to look back on the Anthony Richardson bench, not bench situation and say that that was a stroke of genius by somebody and it awakened a giant, or was it then they brought him back and decided to utilize his legs more, which masked the fact that he still needs to learn to be a more effective passer?
I think so far it looks like it was a smart thing to do because some of his numbers, he still doesn't have great completion percentage numbers, but he also has a very high percentage of drops and his completion percentage over expected. So there's these numbers where it says you should complete this or you shouldn't. And they figure that out with the stat people figure that out. And then they put it against your actual completion percentage. And a positive number is good, a negative number is bad. His number going into the benching was negative 13, which is terrible. It's one of the biggest you see normally. And since he's been back, I think he's at -3, which means he's still not a super accurate passer. But -3 is much more in the range of what you would expect. I think Flacco was kind of around there too for an NFL starting quarterback. So what we've seen so far is that he is a better passer than he was before the benching.
Joel Erickson of the Indy Star is our guest. He joined us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Joel, for years, the one constant with the Colts offensively has been Jonathan Taylor. There was a time where his yards per carry were up there with league record-setting potential if it would continue for his career. this year there's been spots, but the last month he's been held under 100 yards. His yards per carry, 2.4, 3.2, 3.8. You talk about guys needing the bye week. Is there anything to be said about that extra rest being enough to catapult Taylor, his involvement, and his situational usage back to the type of heights that A, he's being paid to get, and B, that would benefit the offense as a whole?
Well, he needs the offensive line to kind of get solidified. It's been such an flux. Glowinski comes back in, and it turns out that they've been dealing with a bigger deficiency at right guard than I think maybe I even realized before that. He needs consistency from the offensive line. I think the other thing, though, is that if you look at this Denver team, they don't give up rushing yards. They just don't. And so for this game specifically, I think maybe it's Richardson's legs that are a bigger deal than Taylor's, just because, the Broncos have not actually played a ton of running quarterbacks so far. And when they did play Baltimore, the Ravens got up so big so quickly that they didn't use Lamar that way. So I think that's maybe the wild card the Broncos haven't seen is the quarterback run. They've been awesome against running backs all season.
We've talked earlier in the show about the depth of the offensive line, and there being some bright spots there for the Colts to be able to, stave off injuries, stave off absences, and do the best that they can. How do you analyze, though, the line and the depth there as a whole, if on the one hand, it's not being fully detrimental to Anthony Richardson, but on the other hand, it might be detrimental to your all-pro running back?
Well, I think the loss of Will Fries probably didn't get enough play. Will Fries was playing at, I think most people believe, a Pro Bowl level, one of the better guards in the NFL. And going from Fries and dropping down, I think really had an effect on the run game in a way that maybe we didn't talk about as much. And so I think part of it is they probably could have added a player like Glowinski in the offseason so that you didn't have to go straight to Dalton Tucker, who's an undrafted free agent. But they went with the young guys. And then just the volume of injuries, you've really got one guy in Quentin Nelson who's played every game now that Smith is dealing with this personal matter. And so that's the biggest thing. It's just they've had so many, and it's hard for anybody to have depth, but they also decided to go with their depth being all young until they signed Glowinski. And I think it just took its toll.
Now, Joel, do you know the difference between bourbon and whiskey?
Yes.
Tell me if I'm correct in this. All bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskeys are bourbons. And bourbons are rather whiskeys that are aged inside of charred barrels, which began by the fact that when they first had to ship down the Mississippi many, many years ago, in Kentucky, they ran out of barrels, so they used barrels that had like burnt corn mash in it, and then that altered the complexion and taste of it, and thus bourbon was born. Is that right?
To be considered bourbon, there are 5 things.
Okay.
It has to be made in the U.S.
Okay.
The mash bill must be at least 51% corn.
Okay.
Cannot be a proof higher than 160. It's usually around I don't think it can be higher than proof than 125, actually. I don't know where I got 160 from. It has to be aged in charred oak barrels and must be bottled at no less than 80 proof.
But it does not have to be from Kentucky now, correct?
It does not, no.
Right. Like there's Indiana bourbons, right?
Yep. There's a significant, in the southern part of the state, there's a really significant operation down there making bourbon.
Now, am I correct in saying that whiskey is spelled with an EY or without the E, dependent upon whether it comes from Ireland or North America?
Ooh, I don't know that.
Okay.
I don't know that one.
I don't know that it's true either. I kind of made it up right there, but I think there's some accuracy in it.
It's fun if it's right.
That's right. It is kind of fun.
On this
right?
show, it's fun if it's not.
See, here's the thing. You call me the beer fairy. Actually, I call myself that. There's no more fairy about it because your dog busted me in the act when I was delivering beer to your house. But when I was just in Scotland and Ireland, I bought it, at the duty. I went to the duty free and I said, I want to buy a bottle of Scotch and whiskey, respectively. but not any that's available in the United States. And then you wonder whether or not you're getting conned, right? Because the guy's like, well, this one right here is fabulous, and I don't believe they have this.
Some dude punked me in the
This is-
duty-free
this is-
section of the London
This is
airport.
Jameson. And you're like, no, that's Jameson. Yeah, I can get that anywhere.
I'm sure that's what happened. It had all the London brandings on it, but one of my nephews is a big bourbon fan as well, and I was like, hey, what's something that he can't get somewhere else? And I totally spent $70 on or whatever it was on something that definitely you probably could get somewhere.
I bought a Scotch that apparently you can't. I came back and in fact you can't get it here, and so that was cool.
There you go.
Yeah, but anyway, okay, Joel. Last thing then. The week of practice. I mean, obviously the Colts getting back at it today. From your eye and just your feel, this is a big one. We know it's a big one. The fans know it's a big one. The media knows it's a big one. Does it feel differently in terms of just the conversation, the focus, or is it in fact the old proverbial? It's just another game in terms of their preparation.
I think they're trying to get to it's just another game. That's the impression I get, is that, listen, they keep saying, like, we know it's a big one, but we don't want to blow that out of proportion. Like, almost like you're trying to convince yourself that you prepare for it like any other game, rather than diving too much into the big thing. I think they know it's a big one.
All right, we'll see what happens. Let me know when you have the gyrator. What exactly happens, okay?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, we'll tell you.
And don't forget, Joel, if it's on a night of if you're tempted after your little bourbon gathering, okay, never forget, right? Beer before liquor, never been sicker. Liquor before beer, you're in the clear.
In the clear. That's very true.
Okay. All right, Joel, appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Joel A. Erickson on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. When we come back, I have tried forever to validate one of my stances about a sports fan base. I've tried to illustrate it. I thought at one time that I came up with the perfect answer that validated, illustrated, and cemented and explained why I felt a certain way about a fan base. And then sometimes Christmas comes early and they do it for you. And they come up with something and you say, there's my answer right there, and now it is irrefutable. Because something happened earlier today that literally is the definition of things that make you go, until it validates something that you've been saying forever and have been trying to prove your point, and then they make it for you. The lunacy of something that was proposed earlier next.
There's a talk radio show in Australia, and the only reason I know about it is for some reason they're in my TikTok algorithm. But they have a gambit where anytime they say the word Christmas on the show, it's just like a normal morning drive time show, they play this song.
I'm going to make a statement here.
Sure.
I'm going to ask that both of you.
Whoa. I'm
brace
innocent
yourself
bias.
here.
Okay, all right.
An official declaration.
Yeah.
My name is Jake Query.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Jake.
I'm a native of Indianapolis, and I'm a 52-year-old pseudo sportscaster in the Circle City. I like that song from Mariah Carey.
We're not going to judge you. It's a good song. It just gets, played like crazy around this time of
I also
year.
like the Wham song. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. I like that. And I also like the Paul McCartney, Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time. I like all three of those. It gets me in the holiday spirit.
I'm right there with you.
I do like the holidays.
We're not going to fight you.
Okay.
Callers might, but we're not going to fight you.
Several years ago, and what I'm about to say is obviously predominantly tongue-in-cheek, okay? There are certain athletic teams, certain programs that one of the things that part of their brand is that they are polarizing. Notre Dame football is a prime example. I think Notre Dame knows the fact, and when I say hate, work with me here. Don't send me the email. I can't believe you're saying hate. You get what I'm saying. Notre Dame football is one that people either love them or hate them. There's nobody that's like, yeah, they're okay. People either are a huge Notre Dame fan or they root for whoever is playing Notre Dame. That's just the way it goes. That's part of, and that is the ultimate compliment of being a national brand. The New York Yankees are the same way. I wouldn't even say the Patriots at this point because their window's kind of closed, right? But so I don't know that the NFL, maybe the Cowboys would be that team.
Chiefs are getting there.
But the Chiefs are a phase.
They are, but I mean,
I'm saying long term in terms of the branding, long term totality. I think it would be the Cowboys.
Are probably the one. Yeah.
The Cowboys are the one that like people are either they're right in the middle. I mean, there's no in the middle. I mean, and so I am one that I hate Ohio State in football. Now, I don't hate their fans. It's funny because, I mean, as people, I mean, I'm a Reds fan, so there's probably a lot of crossover. When I'm at a Reds game and, De La Cruz hits a homer and I'm high-fiving somebody, I'm probably high-fiving somebody that, like, I couldn't stand during the Ohio State-Clemson game or the Ohio State-Indiana game or the Ohio State-Purdue game, whatever it might be, right?
Next time you go to a Reds game, go yell OH and see what happens.
Oh, exactly, right? But there is a boorish nature to the Ohio State fan base. Now, several years ago, I was at the Mid-Ohio sports car race, and I was having dinner. Shannon had driven over, and myself, Shannon, Nick Yeoman was with me, and then our buddy Damien that lives in Cleveland. And we were having this discussion about trying to pinpoint why I don't like Ohio State football fans. And a table next to us of guys my age were sitting there. And one of them goes, look, I'm a diehard Ohio State fan. I just don't get it. Like, I think you're just jealous. You're just jealous. You're envious. And I go, he's saying it tongue-in-cheek kind of. And I say, there's just something different about Ohio State that Ohio State fans can't see as boorish. And every other fan base sees you as boorish for it. And he goes, I just don't get it. I think it's just because we win. And I said, look, here's the best way I can say it. And I've told this before. I said, let's just say I go, you a married guy? He goes, oh, yeah. I said, how many kids you got? 3 kids. How old? 6, 9, and 11. I go, okay. If a genie popped out of a bottle and said to you that because you rescued him, he guaranteed that for the entirety of their life, all 3 of your children will never know illness, they will never know heartache, they will never know plight, and they will never know sorrow. They will live a life that is completely void of any sadness whatsoever, and they will have every dollar possible, and they won't even need it for medical care because they will never have a health issue. And at the age of 99, they will pass peacefully in their sleep, all 3 of your kids. But in trade-off for that, you will never again in your lifetime see an above 500 Ohio State football season. Would you do it? And the guy goes, no, never in 1,000 years. Never, nope, not going to do it. I would never do that. And I said, exactly. And that's the difference between Ohio State and every other fan base. And you think that makes you a diehard fan, and everybody else thinks, Anyway, most of that was tongue-in-cheek. Then today I see this, and I'm reading it from ESPN off of their website. Ohio State Rep. Josh Williams introduced a bill Tuesday that would classify flag planting at Ohio Stadium around Buckeye football games as a felony. The OHIO Sportsmanship Act, authored by Williams, comes in response to Michigan's attempt to plant the flag. According to the bill, quote, no person shall plant a flagpole with a flag attached to it in the center of the football field at Ohio Stadium of The Ohio State University on the day of a college football competition, whether before, during, or after the competition. Whoever violates this section is guilty of felony of the 5th degree. A felony of the 5th degree in the state of Ohio carries a penalty of 6 to 12 months in prison, up to a $2,500 fine, and up to 5 years probation. Now, what about this? What happens if
An Ohio State player?
thank you, or a band member or a cheerleader is waving the flag before the game, getting everybody fired up and gets caught up in the moment and plants it in the middle of the field? According to that, felony, thanks. Going away to Mansfield, 5 years. See ya. Right?
Do you think Charmin
Or
sponsored
12
the bill?
months. What's that?
You think Charmin sponsored the bill?
Seriously.
It's crazy, man.
I mean, I'm hopeful, and I don't know. I'm hopeful this is tongue-in-cheek, right? I'm hopeful. But the fact that you don't know for certain whether this is tongue-in-cheek further cements my point. I don't think this is serious. I'm assuming this is completely like just to get people talking about something other than the fact that Michigan just beat them for the 4th year in a row, and Ryan Day, as somebody so perfectly said, is the Michael Jordan of James Franklin's. I hope this is, don't look at the right hand because I don't want you to see what the left hand's doing. I hope that's what this is. But the fact that you don't know, if I said to you, there's a state lawmaker that's going to write a bill about their college football team that is totally absurd and it's serious, what school do you think it relates to? Ohio State would be amongst the first 3 answers, right?
yeah, no
if
doubt.
not the first.
By the way, the Representative Williams said because of the fact the Ohio General Assembly closes next week, it would have to be reintroduced, this OHIO Sportsmanship Act. He said he plans to do that if he doesn't see further steps from the Big Ten, NCAA, or individual schools to curb flag planting, describing the bill as a shot across the bow, putting our institutions on notice. So, I don't know, Jake. That seems relatively serious.
A felony. So, what are you in here for? Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I had
Is
a
that
dude
Corbin?
did me wrong. That dude did me wrong. I went out that night, had a little bit too much whiskey. Took
Corbin, I
the
didn't know you were here.
law into my own hands. It was a cold night, but he learned his lesson. What about you? What'd you do? I was at the Ohio State game, and I'm a Bowling Green fan. What about the time that in the Ohio Bobcat? Do you remember that? When the Ohio Bobcat, like the kid that was the Ohio Bobcat mascot, was some senior, and he spent 3 years toiling as the Ohio Bobcat mascot specifically because he knew his senior year they were going to play in the big house. And so he came out on the field and then immediately looked for the Buckeye and tackled him and knocked his head off. You remember that?
Vaguely.
He's like, where's Brutus? I'm finding Brutus. And this guy, literally, went to mascot practices and sat through Ohio basketball games, those Thursday night Maction games against Akron in a 35-degree sleet storm as a sophomore and all that. And everybody's like, why? You're still the mascot again next year? Yep, doing it till my senior year. Strictly because he had it circled on his calendar that when he saw Brutus, he was going to full sprint as the Bobcat, tackle him, and knock Brutus's head off. And then I think there might have been a fight that ensued. And what sort of a useless nut is going to have anything to do with fighting a Bobcat, right? Are you looking at the video right now?
The tackle.
Yeah. That guy's my hero. They should have put him on the Ohio, not even because it's Ohio State, just because of the long game plan. Like you have to admire the kid's ability to long-term game plan. The fact that he's just like, I'm just going to be a mascot. Yeah, it was tough walking in the size 27 stuffed shoes, but it's going to be worth it one day.
Jake, when you were reading off the proposal, you did it wrong. You said OHIO. It takes 2 people to spell Ohio.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that's right. Well, unless they lose to Michigan, in which it becomes OHNO, right? Now, are you watching the video still, Jimmy?
Yeah.
Are there various angles of this?
There are. So Brutus comes out with the flag as he's running out with the team
he better
and
not
everything.
have planted it.
And
What if Brutus plants it at the midfield?
Felony. He's going to chip the Bobcat takes off from the sideline on a mission and just seeks out Brutus. Misses the first time. Brutus laughs at him, keeps walking. The Bobcat gets back up, runs to the end zone. Brutus is in, jumps on his shoulders and tackles him again.
It's awesome, right?
The headline: Ohio State mascot Brutus attacked by Ohio University.
Now,
mascot.
here's the thing. Brutus, you said, had a flag?
He might not have. There were flags behind him. It's tough.
Did any of them plant it?
Brutus did have a flag, yes.
Does he plant it?
No, he stayed
Lock
upright.
him up.
Stayed upright. He's fine for now. But
If he
warned.
plants the flag, lock him up.
Yep.
That would be what they should do to point the absurdity of this, like the dotting of the I. They should get somebody. Is Ohio going to do that next? Should they invite out somebody from Michigan to do the dotting of the I and then give them a flag and ask them, an Ohio State flag, and ask them to plant it in the field as a goodwill gesture, and then as soon as the person does it, have them arrested for a felony?
There's
all a ruse?
Yeah, there's ways to, I think, have a little bait and switch. Yeah.
What is Purdue's biggest tradition?
The drum.
Yeah, the draw. I was going to say during basketball season, it's the IU sucks chant,
Well, yeah,
which
no,
is
for
absurd
sure.
also
Yes,
because
correct.
it shows that IU lives in their head all year long.
Yep.
And there's no reason they should.
Yep.
The drum is cool, right? The
Yeah.
world's largest. Do we know if it's world's largest?
I think it's a technicality, right? It's like either like circumference or diameter of it or something. I don't know, but I think it does rank in some capacity.
Actually, I've heard this. I don't know this.
Okay.
But somebody told me that at the First College of Percussionism in Djibouti,
Mm-hmm.
they have a bigger drum. I don't know that for certain.
What do you do if you were the world's largest drum first? You go and remodel? Do you have to now one-up yourself?
You get a Sharpie and you put a little 2 and a little ND right in between world's and largest, right? Largest and drum. Now, no, between world's and largest, you'd put it world's second largest drum. The other thing, so for Indiana, the biggest tradition at Indiana would be what? It's probably the William Tell Overture and the praising of the flags, right? Do they still do that at the 8-minute timeout?
Yeah, flags is key as anything.
However,
there's the obsession, and I'm a part of it as well, but there's a lot of lovingness towards Martha the Mop Lady, and
it's
that
cool.
being thrown up
It's
there.
cool. I was at an Indiana-Kentucky game in Freedom Hall in the mid-'90s when Indiana, during their timeout, did their flag thing, and then Kentucky came out. Kentucky has a flag that is actually a billboard that is like the size of Rhode Island. And they brought that out, and it literally was like, ew, boy. I mean, it kind of felt like you were doing a display of your newest Yugos in the Ferrari factory. It was a little much. Do you have plays of the day, Jimmy?
I got a couple.
Okay, one of them, I'm going to put the over-under on whether or not this Williams bill actually passes in Ohio. Although that's a difficult proposition to make because in Ohio you just never know, which is why, in fact, it proves my point about Ohio State. But Jimmy's plays of the day are next.
Plenty of plays of the day to get to, but first, let's visit some Champions League. Match day 6 of 8 continues today in the UEFA Champions League. We'll take Barcelona to win outright on the money line over Dortmund. Also kicking off around that same time, we'll take Manchester City to win the money line over Juventus. In the NBA Cup.
Juventus?
Indeed.
Is that a new team?
No, they've been around for a long time.
Cristiano Ronaldo used to play for them,
He
right?
did, Eddie. Look at you. How about that?
Thanks.
Man, Eddie Garrison, tip of the cap there.
Footballer, Eddie
NBA Cup continues tonight. We will lay the 8 with the
Emirates
New York
NBA
Knicks.
Cup.
Sorry, don't want to get in trouble with the NBA overlords there. Emirates NBA Cup
Thank you.
continues tonight. We will lay the 8 on the New York Knicks. They are favored by 8 points tonight at Madison Square Garden against the Atlanta Hawks. Nightcap, Warriors, Rockets. Give me over 24.5 total points for Warriors guard Steph Curry. Eddie, any plays for you?
No, sir. I'm interested to see how some of these teams play it. Like Atlanta shouldn't be here. Does New York take it serious? Golden State, Houston, that should be a fun one.
The Warriors apparently have won 15 straight against the Rockets, I saw. So just food for thought in case you're a better on historical trends. But those are your plays of the day.
What team was that you said?
Juventus.
And what league is that? That's the Champions League?
It's in
Soccer.
the Champions League, correct, yes.
Now, my team...
They are part of Serie A in Italy.
Okay. So my team, Ipswich, they are third from the bottom in the Premier League.
In danger of relegation.
I was going to say, what's the relegation policy?
I think it's bottom 3, bottom 4.
Can you get relegated if you're in your first year of promotion?
Indeed.
So it's not
Bottom 3 relegation. So they
this
would
is,
be.
This is like when Kansas football had the fat guy that was coaching them, and then so they like got themselves into BCS level, and then they were instantly relegated because they found out that guy was like walking around naked or something, right?
I mean, without the nudity, yes, that's similar.
That's disappointing.
You don't get a free year.
Now there's a Bologna. Are you a fan of them?
Bologna?
Yeah, Bologna.
I'm unfamiliar with their game.
You know,
So disgusting.
Bologna, just so you know, on their team, I don't know if you know this.
Do they also spell it Bologna?
They do. Most of their team ringers, just so you know, for what that's worth. Now, hold on. I'm looking up here, though. I don't see the team you were talking about. What
Which
was
one?
The one that you said that.
Juventus?
Yes.
It's with a J.
Yeah.
I see it now. They're way down here, though. They suck. Did you
I did not play them. I played Manchester City, who also has not
played
played
them
great
means
lately.
that you are.
I bet on Manchester City to win.
Okay. Did they do over-unders? Like how does the line work in football?
So generally, they don't advertise a spread in the same way.
I was going to say, because
you can find it. Like yesterday, we had a play that was minus 1.5. You can find goal lines, but generally, you're betting money lines or over-unders versus a particular spread for soccer.
Can you start mixing the NHL into your plays of the day?
I could try to, if you'd like. If you want me to
Is that
throw it in there.
Let me ask you this: what sport confirms like a degenerate disorder of gambling? If you're gambling on what, it means that you have an issue.
I mean, you can bet on almost anything overseas. So if you're getting into like the Korean baseball league, I think you're probably walking a slippery slope. If you could bet on table tennis for a time.
Used to set their alarm for like 5 a.m. to be able to watch Korean baseball to wager on it. Is that a sign of a problem?
I mean, like it's one of two things. It's either a sign of a problem, or if you are this like data-driven bettor and you feel like you have an edge and you're winning consistently, not just throwing around money because you like a team's name, then no, I don't think it's a sign of a problem. But if you're trying to catch up losses that you had the night before betting on Florida State, then yeah, I'd say you're in danger of a problem.
I know somebody who wagered on darts.
I did give out a dart play. I did do that. That's true.
That was recently, wasn't
It
it?
was last year.
But that was also, wasn't it that like the dart finals?
It was the World Championships of darts.
Okay, here's what I miss. Let me tell you how I know that this world has just become too soft.
Because they're having bills introduced to stop flag planting and having felonies attached to it?
Numero uno,
okay.
Right? And number two is this. There was nothing better. JMV will back me up on this 100%. I've never been more confident in my life than the fact that what I'm about to say, when John comes in here, he'll be like, oh, totally. The coolest backyard game, fun for the whole family, bonding together.
Jackpot.
Solid game.
How does jackpot go?
You want me to do it?
Yeah.
So basically, you have people that are downfield somewhere to catch a football that you're going to throw in the air, and when it's thrown in the air, the person that's throwing the ball would give certain dollar amounts that's worthy of the catch. Sometimes negative amounts. You'd have to be like, oh, I don't want to catch that one, and then ultimately there would be like a jackpot of like a ton of points you could get on the catch.
Okay.
And then you win.
Yep.
So if you are in the scrum, you're wanting to push people out of the way to make the catch because it's worth a lot of money.
Correct. Be careful, though, because it could be negative 5,000 points. You're like, oh, no, I don't want to catch that one.
Well, but at what point do you know?
That's the game. You never know. Sometimes it's right before it's at apex. Depends on how friendly your thrower is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Dangerous game. Gosh, that's a memory. Good job, Eddie.
I want people to close their eyes and imagine it's the summer of 1983.
I can't do that.
Neither can I.
You're closing your eyes. It's the summer of 1983. Maybe you've got a little Hall & Oates, maybe a little Christopher Cross playing.
Remember that one time when you told Eddie to get the show younger?
That's right. And the families gathered. This was back when people used to do this in the backyard. No phones, no texting the kids to see if they're going to come outside.
Only worry you had was the dinner bell, and if you were close enough to hear
That's exactly correct. And everybody's playing the popular backyard game that was the most awesome thing of all time. JMV just walked in. He's gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. You're standing there, and you're JMV. I'm standing there, and I'm looking at my feet, and there's a round, just piece of plastic that's a round circle.
Yeah.
And you lean back.
You do.
And you underhand throw that bad boy, and there it goes through the air, and we're going to see whether or not you get it in the target or not. And I don't know a single person that was ever injured from this, but Jarts was the best backyard game of all time. And I don't think
Can you not get them anymore?
No.
They don't make them?
No.
It is so much better than what is that thing they throw where it kind of wraps around? It's got two balls on the end and it wraps
I know what you're talking
around
about.
the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I think it's better than cornhole.
Totally. Jarts is the greatest backyard game of all time.
Yes.
I mean,
you
cornhole's
get a
pretty similar,
definitive
but
answer whether or not. I like the ones that hit the round thing, the plastic round thing, and sometimes move it over and sometimes move it in, right?
I mean,
the difference between making I guess, would you call it a bullseye? Is it called a bullseye then, or just a goal or score? I don't know.
I think it was just a
What was it
score,
called?
right?
Yeah.
Beersby is my favorite current outdoor game. That's a more newer concept. You're throwing
Beersby?
So you have two poles about, 30, 40 yards away from one another. Actually, not that far. 30, 40 feet away from one another. My apologies.
Primarily played on the beach.
Can be played in the backyard, though, because they have backyard sets. But you're throwing a Frisbee at beer bottle on opposite pole. And your job, if you're throwing, is to knock the bottle off the pole for points. And your job as defense is to catch the bottle before it hits the ground.
Okay.
Fun game.
Not bad.
We used to go to my pool and shoot beer bottles off the fence with a 357 Magnum.
Now, what about this?
Does that categorize in the fun?
Is that a fun
everyday
backyard game?
Was this before? This was obviously after the bottles were emptied, right?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever let bottle? I'm not condoning this for kids either.
Yeah.
Did you ever let bottle rockets off into like a lake?
Yeah. Well, see, back
They'd go underwater. And
Oh, yeah. Well,
It was
you used to shoot them at fish. You ever shoot them at fish?
Yeah.
Because if you act like a little bugs on top of the water, you can, shoot them at fish. But we used to have somebody before fireworks were legal to go to Tennessee. His name was Emil.
Sad Sam's probably where he went, right?
Emil Fields drove a 72 Nova down to Tennessee and brought back a trunk full of fireworks, and we bought fireworks out of his trunk every year.
It was. Do you remember what a big deal it was to drive back from Florida and stop at, Crazy Willie's or whatever, and Sad Sam's and all the fireworks stores? I mean, and you'd go in those places, and it was unbelievable.
I just talked
right?
to Emil the other day. He said, "You remember when you used to buy fireworks when you were 12 off of me from my trunk?" And I go, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, I remember that stuff." But
by the way, he now has an 82 Nova,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But it was always the same weekend as Wimbledon. Remember, that was back then, the July 4th.
100.
Or
Yes,
Wimbledon
Yes.
always seemed to be in and
Huge.
around July the 4th.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
And that's back when we paid attention.
Nothing like watching Britain's finest sporting
Yes.
event to celebrate our independence.
Borg,
right?
McEnroe, Connors, and then Boris. That was the Boris
Pat
Becker
Cash.
era. Pat Cash.
I mean, Michael
Stefan
Chang.
Edberg.
It's great, man. I mean, it was so much fun. Like, and
I
then
couldn't name two dudes now.
totally.
Back then, I knew the top 15 probably.
Did you like Capriati?
I did.
She was cool,
I liked
right?
it when she kind of went crazy.
She
a little
did,
bit,
I know.
too, Yeah.
She went on like
I think she was even more attractive when she went a little
I know.
nuts.
She went on a shoplifting spree. I think.
I want to hang around with her for a minute. Let's do it.
She was a fun girl. I think it's-
Gabriella Sabatini always floated my boat.
Gabriella Sabatini, thank goodness, did not wear antiperspirant, right?
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
she
just BO'd everybody up.
well, no, her sweat she would always wear a white
Yeah.
shirt.
Right. Oh
and then the
yeah.
sweat-
Because,
oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So Sabatini was one of my favorites.
Gabriella
back then.
Sabatini was the hottest. She was the hottest woman playing tennis in the 80s.
Were you a Hingis person? You like Martina Hingis?
She was okay. I
She
mean,
was
that
a little bit robotish.
she was actually. I would say that she was really entering into her prime, kind of as what we're talking about was kind of phasing itself out, right? She was kind of in that last era hurrah. But Gabriella Sabatini, let me tell you.
How about Orancho Sanchez Vicario? Hana Monalikova.
There was a picture of Gabriella Sabatini in Sports Illustrated one year, and anybody that saw it remembers exactly what I'm talking about. You got a big show lined up, John?
We do.
What do you got?
Who's coming on today? That's a good question. Tyson Lawton. Yeah, running back. IU's coming on. He's one of the JMU transfers. He's coming on today. So Evan Sidery, we're going to talk about some possible Pacers. Do the Pacers ever play again, Eddie? Are they on the schedule? Friday?
Friday at
on the road,
Philly.
right?
Yep.
Man.
Next home Sunday?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Pure
Or sorry.
excitement
Yes,
right there.
sirs.
That's right.
Sorry about
How
that.
about Anna
My
Kournikova?
God, is that awful? Who
It
came
is
up with
terrible.
that? Hey, Eddie.
Big
Find
fan
out
of
who came
yours.
up with that idea. That is the
That-
worst.
I'm with you.
Do
I'm
you
with
know
John.
who that is? Who came up with that idea? It's so bad.
It's bad.
When it looks on a billboard, it is billboards. Anyway,
Shannon
don't
said to me,
advertise
she's like,
on a
why does
billboard.
everybody say that?
Nobody
Then
hears your
we-
sees
we
your
s-
message.
We saw it on a building, and she's like, "What in the world?"
Yeah. That's what hillbillies used to say about the hey, I'm gonna go see the Sirs. Yeah!
That's exactly right.
Big fan of the Sirs.
Saying "sirs" is kind of the equivalent of those people that put together those cult songs. It's like trying way too hard, man.
Yeehaw!
Way
It's
too hard.
Sirs.
All right, John's
Yes,
up next.
sir.
We'll back with
I
you
just
at
lost my
noon
50.
tomorrow. Thanks for listening to Query and Company, sirs. We'll talk to you tomorrow.